Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight we have a few things on the agenda. I would take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any other discussion?
Mayor, could you repeat who the motion and the second was, please?
Sure. The motion was made by Sean, seconded by Rick.
And I'm asking, Mr. Mayor, for J in the consent agenda to be taken separately.
Okay. So we'll take J out of the consent agenda and place it on the regular agenda as item number 6. Okay. Any other discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Mr. Cavett, Highway 19 Main Street Reconstruction Project update.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Just give you an update. There's been obviously a lot of digging over the last couple months, and maybe tomorrow it's going to feel like some road is actually getting built. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, the concrete crew is scheduled to come in and start curb work from the Wells Fargo intersection up to just west of Central Avenue. If you've noticed what's going on out there right now, they've been building the road bed up to First Avenue down by the gas station. That's nearly, they'll probably have that complete in the next day or so, the road bed portion, and then obviously they'll probably have concrete work following sometime soon after that. But the curb work and paving will be happening this week. So it feels like there's a lot getting done. There was a little bit of a setback. If you've followed some of the updates or comments made in the past, there was definitely some concerns about the subgrade. MnDOT and the contractor took a step back and decided to make some changes and actually pulled some material back out, redid some of the work there on that block between First Avenue West and Central Avenue. Anyway, that's been taken care of. They're satisfied with where they're at today, and again, are building road bed. Utility work is all continued straight on through. In fact, all the utility work now is totally complete all the way up to First Avenue, up at the gas station intersection. All the main line, sanitary sewer and water is done all the way past Columbus Avenue to the east. And in fact, by the end of this week, all the utility work should be done past Columbus Avenue, up towards Lincoln Avenue. With that, next week, the traffic is planned to switch the crossover intersection, which is currently at First Avenue East. It will get moved to Columbus Avenue on a temporary gravel surface. And then the First Avenue intersection down by New Prague Times and the gas station will actually close. And that way the work, preparing the road, doing the concrete work, the curb and gutter, and starting that roundabout can now happen once that intersection is closed. The other thing that'll happen next week is there'll be another 3 blocks of removals that are planned. So picking up from Lincoln Avenue down by the library and working 3 blocks east towards Lexington Avenue should happen next week. And that way the utility work can begin soon after that. So that's kind of where we're at. I'd say there was a little bit of a setback on some of the roadway concrete work starting, but in terms of the utility work progressing, opening up more territory for road to be built, progress seems to be going well. So I guess that's really all I have for an update. I'm maybe missing something, or you all have some questions that maybe you have or have come up from constituents.
I have.
Yes.
Go- Yeah, go ahead.
I had a question on the, the subgrade that we had a problem with.
Correct.
They watched, bulldozers come in with, I don't know, big wrap rock or whatever, but I mean, they were 2-3 inches across. That's not gonna present frost problems in the future? I mean, they were surprised that they were gonna use that big of rock to, fortify that substructure.
Yeah,
Because of
yeah,
the,
yeah, I'll admit it was, it seemed, I don't want to, for lack of a better term, definitely, conservative. No, should not cause any issues with frost because actually, they're using a combination of fabric. We have a sand layer and then the gravel layer on top of that. So there's a lot of separation there. That really will distribute some of the load across it. The issue has been differential soil. So what happens with differential soils is you get a little bit of differential movement. So this provides something to help bridge that differential. And that's really where you have the concern that might be from frost. The issue with bringing bigger rocks in with frost is if it's up close to your roadbed. That would be a problem if it was right under or in the gravel section. And this is well below. This is like 2 feet below that section.
okay, I didn't see it, but apparently they thought that they were putting it more on top and then trying to run it down with, grading equipment and whatever else, but, and I know that that's a state highway and the majority of the, the funding is coming from the state, but does that, if for some reason, 3-5 years down the road, this presents a problem and our new road starts to crumble and fall apart because of that, I mean, is that the state's responsibility at that time, or would that put
Yeah,
the city of New Prague on the liability thing? Because I mean, these
no,
guys
no,
the guys
this
that I
is
talked to,
completely,
Chris, they're longtime road building guys. They were just really shocked at witnessing that, but maybe they didn't have all the details, but.
yeah, well, I think there's some details that obviously they're not privy of it. And I would say what they built was very conservative, meaning it's added extra insurance and security for the roadway. And again, if there is any issues, this is a MnDOT road. This is MnDOT decisions. And again, if anything happens there, it's going to be a MnDOT process to deal with it. And again, what they've done is actually added a higher level of security to that roadway and the roadbed.
So you, as our city engineer, you're comfortable with it, though? I just want to be able to report back that you.
Yes, for lack of a better term, I'm very comfortable with it. I don't want to say it's overkill. I just mean it's way beyond what we would do. So they've taken it up to a kind of a higher level in terms of
Oops.
Did you freeze?
insurance for the roadway and help bridge some of those differential soils. There was just a lot of goofy stuff happening with the soils there. And if you think about an area like that and how that developed over the last 100 and some years, buildings being built, utilities being put in, basements being dug, black dirt probably being, tossed outside the building. A lot of the walks in the early days would have been just boardwalks built over the poor soils. And then eventually sidewalks were put in and road, the road was originally concrete paved in 1931, and they built it really right over the top of whatever was there. And then it's obviously had number of pavings over the top of that. So there was just a lot of surprises underneath there, and especially on that block.
So all that extra work that was done, did that affect the city residents taxpayer wise? I mean, was that, are we on the hook for any of that or a portion of it, or?
We are on the hook for none of it other than, let's say, all the rework or the work that was done there. The DOT is completely 100%. They're taking care of that. What they did do as a result of the discoveries they had there is they had decided to beef up their sand section and adding fabric throughout the rest of the project. It's something we had questioned early on. And I think they took a step back and looked and decided that it was in the best interest of everybody involved to thicken the sand section and then add a geotextile fabric, which is what we do on our local projects. With that, because of the cost participation policy, we have a very small share of that, because we pay 10% of the parking lanes, and that's what's in the cost participation policy. So essentially, we're paying for a foot on either side of the road for fabric and additional sand, and it's a fairly minor number, and it's all covered by that state grant or the federal grant portion of the funding. So there is going to be a little bit of additional cost for some of the changes they're making going forward, but it's very, very minor on our end.
Do we have a total number, or is that something we could get at the end of
I
it?
don't have it with me, I don't know, I want to say that in the area of 10,000 maybe comes to mind. I can't remember what it was, and it's fairly significant for MnDOT. And again, that share of it will be funded from that federal grant, and or state aid. So it's not coming directly out of New Prague general levy or any taxpayer dollars.
Okay. And then I just had one other quick question. Somebody said that there was the potential for, right by the power plant, when they start digging there's a lot of infrastructure underneath the road there. I'm guessing because of the power plant. Do we see any delays or any issues with some of that significant structure that's under the road there going from the power plant, or?
No, in fact, that work's already done. There was a gas main that had to be dealt with. There was a fiber optic from Comcast that had to be dealt with. There was a major electric conduit coming out of the power plant and crossing Main Street that was known, planned for, and dealt with. In fact, there's some really neat photos from a couple of weeks ago showing how that was suspended with an I-beam. And at this point, that work is done and they've passed that point. So it was all planned for.
Okay, great, thank you. That was all I had.
Mayor?
Yes.
What I'd point out, to add to Chris's comments and maybe have him expand on, is that in taking a look at any of the design changes or any of the change orders that occur within the scope of the roadway between the curb and gutter, so to speak, is that is dealt with the MnDOT inspectors, and many times those decisions go back to District 7 and are dealt with the engineering staff. The inspectors themselves don't have the abilities to just sign off, and so Chris, as the project manager, obviously is working with the contractor and the MnDOT personnel, but they're going back and getting the approvals from within MnDOT district themselves before any of those changes actually get implemented. And so it's not just off the cuff, well, we'll just change this or do this. They had to get the approvals, and as you just heard Chris say, going forward in other parts of the project now going forward, they're gonna be using fabric and sand a little bit differently than what was in their original design. Chris and I could sit here and tell you that we talked about these design standards, Chris, how many years ago in the planning efforts, and we couldn't get MnDOT to change, knowing what we were likely to run into, and so now they're having to do it in the field and in place. And so, you know, there's a lot of expert outside construction people that have their thoughts and comments about what's going on, but I can assure you this issue gets flushed out and reviewed by Chris as our city engineer, as the project engineer, working with what the contractor is saying that are their thoughts, but then it goes back into the MnDOT inspectors who run it up the flagpole in District 7 back in Mankato before any kind of changes get made.
Sure, and
Just so that you know that.
No, absolutely, and I'm not a road builder, so I don't know. All I can do is get the answers for the taxpayers that seem to have the questions, so, which I did, so I feel great about it. So
But I just wanted to let you know, that's the process that we go through with any of the component pieces being dealt with by MnDOT and certainly being paid for by MnDOT.
Sure, and those are our tax dollars too, so I wanted to, you know, it's nice to know that there's a review process and a science behind it, so.
Are there any other questions for Chris? Okay, hearing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Okay,
I always call you Lisa. It's Liza.
Liza.
Liza, God, dang it. And you've told me that how many times? Would you please come up to the podium, and you're on the agenda next for the recruitment of process for city administrator. I apologize.
No worries. I am completely used to it. And one of these days I will ask my mom, why did you choose Liza over Elizabeth? Because yes, no, it's wonderful to be here before you tonight. Thank you so much for doing your homework. And I should probably just provide a little bit of background, first of all, for those that are listening in tonight. So obviously the city council authorized the advertisement for their next city administrator position. So we went live with advertising on April 20th and received applications through May 18th. There were 34 applications. And upon review of minimum qualifications as well as the desired attributes that were shared by you as the council as well as your leadership staff, we were able to narrow that down to 12 quality candidates that you have had a chance to review their information. There was one person that did withdraw, and as I explained in an email to you earlier on, they withdrew just upon reviewing how it would affect their family, and it was nothing personal. In fact, they were very excited about the position. We had talked extensively about it, but they had a change of heart, unfortunately. So you did have 11 quality candidates to review last week. And an email I submitted to you, you had a chance to look at their cover letter, their resumes, their response to an information disclosure question that would reveal potential red flags in their backgrounding, as well as the results for their work personality index. We were able to see where their work personality traits kind of lies, some of their strengths where they were maybe a little bit more weak. And then you also had an opportunity to review their responses to video interviews, which I think is one of my favorite parts of the process, and especially one of the final questions, which is why is it that you're interested in New Prague? So I think it tells you a lot about the candidates. So then I've asked you to review that all on your own individual basis, and then we'll decide tonight who we're interested in getting to know on a face-to-face basis. Before we do that though, just a quick reminder, the information regarding the semifinalists is considered private information, so we can't obviously reveal their name. We don't want to give any identifying characteristics away as far as maybe where they previously worked or where they're currently working or living now that could potentially give that candidate's information away. So the next step of the process, it is very elementary, really basic. I hand out a ballot and I ask that you identify your top 4 that you're personally interested in getting to meet on a face-to-face basis. We will refer to those candidates by the number that's been assigned to them. I will take your ballot, I'll read them out loud, and then we'll determine from there who is it that most naturally should be invited to an interview. Obviously, it'd probably be those that would receive the most votes. Those candidates that don't receive any votes, we're not even going to talk about them. And then maybe those that fall in the middle, that's where we can determine, well, how many candidates do you want to get to know? I generally recommend 4 to 6 because quite often there's usually one that will withdraw due to whether they've been offered a position elsewhere or again they've had change of heart due to some unknown reason. So I will hand out the ballot, but I want to make sure there aren't any questions before we proceed.
I understand.
This feels also exciting.
Like 7th grade all over.
Yeah. Put your head down and raise your.
Thank you.
Are we putting the name or the number?
Copy your neighbors.
Just the number that's
Don't copy your neighbors.
Do you have the number,
I do not.
Okay,
and
I can give
have
that to you. No
Here, I can share.
Yeah, the problem that I have difficulty getting on the city email, so, and the staff has been great to send it to my work email, so I get most of the emails, but I did not see that, so I'll rely on Maggie here to.
Do you want the council member's name on these things?
No.
Okay.
I did not.
You can't see it?
No, I didn't get a chance to review any of it, because I'm not on my she only sent it to our city email, and I don't have access to that, so I'm not that concerned about it, I'm sure if she had 6, she just wrote that.
Okay.
Okay, so 4 ballots. All right, so I will read these out loud so everybody can follow along. And then we'll tally the votes and determine who will receive invitations. All right, ballot number 1, I have a vote for candidate number 3, candidate number 7, number 8, and number 11. Next ballot, I have a vote for candidate number 8, number 6, number 5, and number 10. Next ballot, I have a vote for candidate number 9, number 4, number 6, and number 7. Our final ballot, I have a vote for candidate number 2, candidate number 3, candidate number 6, and candidate number 8. So candidate number 1, no votes. Candidate number 2, 1 vote. Candidate number 3, 2 votes. Candidate number 4, 1 vote. Candidate number 5, 1 vote. Candidate number 6, 3 votes. Number 7, 2 votes. Number 8, 3 votes. And 9, 10, and 11, each with 1 vote. So your highest catching votes are candidates number 3, 6, 8, and 7.
Liza, could you read those over again, please?
Yep, you bet. So candidate number 1, 0 votes. Number 2, 1 vote. Candidate number 3, 2 votes. Candidate number 4 and 5 each received 1 vote. Candidate number 6, 3 votes. Number 7, 2 votes. Number 8, 3 votes. And number 9, 10, and 11 each 1 vote. So your highest catching votes for your candidates are number 3, 6, 7, and 8. Now this is where the conversation can begin. Is that a natural invitation for interviews, your face-to-face interviews, of which we'll talk about here shortly, how you would like that day to look? And is 4 candidates enough, or do you want to invite more than that?
Well, I think the 4 that come out the highest, in my opinion, all were very strong. And I think 4 interviews would be enough, based on their video interviews, the questions that they answered, and of course their resumes. So it was interesting how it kind of shook out, that many of us chose the same one. So I think that's very telling.
I'd be fine with those 4 too, also. Anybody else?
I'm good with it.
I'm comfortable with it also. I guess I'm surprised that it was as spread out. I guess I had the opposite perception of it, but that there wasn't more uniformity with it. But I would be comfortable with a 4, as I understand it to be 3, 6, 7, and 8. Is that correct?
Correct. 3, 6, 7, and 8.
Okay.
All right, wonderful. In the morning, I will put together a press release which will share the finalist information, their background, their education. I will share that with city staff so that they can share it as they feel is appropriate. I would imagine with your leadership staff as well as members of the media and public. So that will be the next step of order. Next is your interview day. I know that within the memo, I listed a few ideas, and this is really an opportunity not only for the candidates to get to know you, and it's also a chance for you to show off your community and your organization, and you're trying to sell yourself as much as they're trying to sell themselves to you. So I had listed a few ideas: city tour. We can do something more informal with your leadership staff, and council can have some participation in there. You can do individual interviews. You can do a community meet and greet event, a leadership staff panel, which would be more of a formalized process. And then I would always recommend this one, your formal panel interview with the entire full council. That's 45 minutes, you sitting just where you are, and your finalist is sitting here with you. And I will produce those questions and obviously ask for your input on those. But what are some of those must-haves that you think is important in having an interview so that you can show off your community?
I like the idea of a meet and greet, because it might be a bit more of a social venue. So we would have an opportunity to see that side of the candidate. And I also like the idea of having a panel interview, which is more pointed questions, you know, something that is obviously not in a social venue, that is more structured, and so we would get to see both faces.
You bet. I forgot to mention that with more of the informal processes too, such as the meet and greet, I do ask for feedback from members of the public, or if you decide you just want certain invited. The point is, I do receive feedback from each of those participants, and then that is shared with you after your final panel interview. So you have an opportunity, if you didn't get a chance to sit in on some of those more informal conversations, then you can at least hear what your staff thinks, maybe what some of your leaders in your community think about each of the candidates. Again, they can have the conversations with the candidates that you can't necessarily, and it's amazing how that information ends up filtering in and may help you in your decision-making process.
I kind of like the individual interviews. You know, where we'd be able to just sit with them in a room individually.
I agree. I'd like that too.
You know, I mean, it'd just be, you know, like you two in there and you just talk and just see how that goes. I think that really tells a lot.
Yep, you bet.
I would also, and then a question, when you described the formal panel interview, are those all staged questions, did you mention?
Yes, yep, it's approximately 18 to 20 questions, and again, I will ask feedback, so if there's some burning questions that you want to ask, that is our script that we stick to. The only way that you can kind of leave that script is if you want to ask for clarification based on a response that they did or did not give you, or you need to, repeat the question because you don't feel that they maybe quite understood, but yes, they are scripted.
Yeah, my reaction would be then even less amount of time there and more free flow individual interviews where you have the ability to ask your own questions rather than the scripted.
Sure.
I don't value the scripted ones as much,
Okay.
but that's just my personal preference. It's, often, I'm not sure, you might have some very juicy questions, but a lot of times the scripted ones are pretty, they're almost ready for all those, but.
Sure.
I think one of the things that we need to be careful of is that some of us may not have interview experience. I have very little. I have done, but I have very little. And I know that Bruce, being in your previous career, and I'm sure, Mayor, with your interaction with the public and with Sean in sales, it might be a little bit more of an easier flow. So I'm comfortable with it, but it's not my strongest point.
I would also still caution, I mean, you have to be very careful about the types of questions that are asked, so I would still recommend that they are somewhat scripted, ask the same question of each of the candidates that you're meeting with. You can formulate those questions, but I would just, yes, I do have a little bit of hesitation. It does make me a little nervous. Sometimes by having two council members together with a candidate can kind of help with that, just monitoring and making sure that no inappropriate questions are asked, and we don't want our candidates coming back and saying, well, they asked me if I was married, or I know you won't do that, but.
Well, no, I don't know that you can assume all of that, but I totally support that too. If you have two council members in an interview and you give us all the information, review the questions you can't ask just to
Yes.
also.
You bet I will.
And that would be, I'm more than comfortable if we do in pairs or.
That's fine.
And does everyone have to do that if we choose to do interview?
Not all of the council members have to. If they have something that pulls them away, and they find that there's more value in the formal panel interview, then I will make sure that I schedule that at a time that all of you can attend.
And those will just split up. Those, you take the, questions 5 through 10 or what, we just go around the table with the formal.
I'm good with whatever you guys wanna do. I mean, scripted questions get scripted answers, so,
But we have input, cause we can strike them.
You bet.
Whatever.
Yep. You can, I will ask for your feedback before I even draft them, and then even before we get started, I'll come and meet with you all, give you a brief orientation for 15 minutes, and then I'll say once again, do you have any changes you'd like to make to the questions? And then if we do that, we need to make that change for all the candidates so that everybody is asked the same.
Yeah.
Are we gonna choose one of the four immediately, or are we gonna whittle it down to two, or?
Nope, the intent is by the time you walk into interview day, you are going to know those candidates very well. Not only with the information that you already have, but now we get started on their backgrounding, and then they'll do their work intellectual profiles. So you'll be able to see their verbal, reasoning, mathematical skills. And then we also do their references, which is another favorite part of mine. That's where I have a good 40 to 45-minute conversation with a former and a current supervisor, and I go into a deep dive conversation, put that into a form of a narrative of which you'll read that before you come in on interview day. By the time you walk in, as I mentioned, I think you'll have a good feel for who they are. Your interview process, I think, will just confirm your thoughts that you already have. And so by the time you are done with your last interview, yes, you will be ready to pick your person.
You reminded me of something that we talked about a presentation, like how they would talk to the public.
Sure. Yes.
Or
If that is something that you're interested in.
I don't know if that would be, something maybe not.
So we could do it, whether it's just in front of you as part of that formal panel interview, or again, if you want some involvement with your public, perhaps then they do put on a presentation in front of the entire room, and we allow for 1 or 2 questions just to see how they respond to questions such as that. So we can do it any way that you envision.
Okay.
So would the meet and greet be at the same day that we would do whether it's a panel or whether it's or two council people at a time interviewing them, or?
So depending on how many items that you want as part of, we may end up having to stretch it over into 2 days. Depending on when you want to do your meet and greet. If you think you'll get a pretty good turnout over your lunch hour, then perhaps we can squeeze it all in. If you don't think you're going to get a good turnout unless you hold it at night, then I would offer that we would do that the night before. And then potentially you're having your candidates stay a night or 2 here in your community, getting to know your community before you engage with them on individual interviews as well as the group interview.
I have to believe that the 4 candidates will get to know the community before that day. I mean, I can't imagine that you can be looking at accepting a job and not do any research, and we know that most of them have anyway, so I prefer to keep it a day.
Okay.
If you're looking at a presentation,
Well,
possibly.
that's just an idea.
I'm just suggesting that maybe you could have one of the scripted questions be a mini case question or something that,
Okay.
and you can even give them that question ahead of time or something.
Yeah, there you go.
And whatever, give them 10 minutes or something within that, so we don't have another thing, because I'm trying to understand, this is gonna be a long day. If all these people are coming at the same time at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, or?
It will be a long day, and yes, they would all be coming. So I would try and arrange the schedule so that they're busy here, and while they're not busy, they can be busy here. I also encourage them to bring along their work so that they can use their free time to work on work or do some more research. I also encourage them to schedule appointments or with area leaders so that they can, again, have an opportunity to get a chance to know the community. So I don't try to allow for much lax time, but it does get to be a long day.
Endurance test of sorts.
That's for you and them. Yes.
I like that idea.
Well, I certainly like the coffee kind of idea. That's more of a relaxed setting. The community meet and greet, I think, is really gonna be a factor of really how many people could we come to get attendance. And if we can't get more than 5, I don't know that.
And maybe is it potentially an opportunity to partner with the chamber? Perhaps there could be a chamber luncheon and then your chamber members can interact with the candidates, or just trying to throw out ideas.
I like that idea.
So I would certainly support it if we can get the right number, whatever that is.
Mike, do we have money in our council contingency fund to put on luncheon and invite business owners and?
But the challenge you're gonna have is trying to find a facility, where we're gonna go that's gonna be able to have, people are still dealing with the separation, issues, even though, we don't have, quite the same restrictions that we did, up until May 28th, is that, you still have some people that are cognizant. As you can see, we're trying to make sure that we protect and do our seating, here, but wherever you would wanna hold that event, do we have sufficient, seating to accommodate that and make sure that if there is a desire, with doing the luncheon and whether it's catered in or how it's handled, where we would try to put on that event.
That's why Brooks, being involved with this at Commerce, I mean, she uses that station,
The depot,
yeah,
yeah, that's a nice place.
and something like that would be great.
Well, it could either be done at the depot or it could be done at the Braz Hotel, that they've got meeting space there where that can be accommodated, where a luncheon can be catered in or something of that nature as well. So there are options that we could put together.
Okay.
And it could be at that time where you have, if you do decide to do a luncheon or a partnership with the chamber, that's where you could have your candidate maybe do a little 10-minute presentation, give them the case study, as you
Or,
mentioned. And
or a presentation about themselves.
yeah, yep.
Um,
Is that appropriate that they have to do it in front of each of the other candidates?
It is pretty standard. We do that. I think it's, again, another wonderful opportunity to observe the candidates and how do they deal with, under pressure. And they have to be used to being able to respond to questions. And I don't know, I guess candidates in processes like this are pretty used to being in the same room with their competition. And it's a great way for you to just observe how they interact with each other. And you'll be, I don't know, I think pleasantly surprised they get along very well.
Well, I think that suggestion kind of hits what you were going at, doing a presentation if they did it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Autobiography of themselves or something.
Yep.
At that setting would be good.
Right. I can work with Administrator Johnson and in working with the chamber to see if that's something that we can pull together on June 29th. I'm not sure when their usual meeting dates are, if that
Or
would
you're
work.
talking the day ahead of time.
It's my understanding that we want to do this all on one day.
I would
No,
like
the
to.
council wants to interview on one day. But whether you have any other component pieces that would go the day before, and I've got a couple that I told Maggie I'd keep my mouth shut, but I'm breaking my own rule, that a couple of things you haven't talked about is a community tour with the candidates, something potentially led by Ken Oddich as our planning director, taking a look at the various city facilities, industrial parks, and other aspects. And the other part is spending any time with the department head staff where they got a chance to meet the candidates and be able to ask questions of them, that some of that could be done on the day before, that if they're gonna come in and be ready to meet with you on the 29th, that Tuesday, and you're gonna do, if you do the one-on-ones and your full-blown interview in the afternoon, that's your interview day is the 29th, or the luncheon that day somehow. But on the day before, you could do a couple of other things where they stay overnight and then are ready for the interview day on Tuesday. So I
The
think there's some
leadership,
things
I'm
to
sorry,
be.
Mike, but the leadership part, I think, is already scheduled in here. That there's a separate leadership thing that day. The department heads.
But
and
not
things.
necessarily all on that day.
Yeah.
I guess I assumed we were
That the
talking about
listing
that
of
for
those
that day.
items, I think, if, help me Liza, the things that she sent you were all things that could be done as part of the interview process, still recognizing that the council, assuming you did the one-on-one interviews or the two on whatever, and if we're down to 4 with 5 council members, somebody's gonna have to double up in that process if you wanna do that, to have those kind of informal interviews, but closer one-on-one. And then in the afternoon, maybe, I don't know what, I don't mean to interject in Liza's schedule, but assuming the 45-minute interviews in the afternoon, you'll have your full day of the interviews. Okay, what can we do the day beforehand? They're gonna have to come in, and can we, be able to meet with staff? Can they go on a community tour? What other components can we do the day before in getting ready for your interview day on Tuesday, the 29th?
Yeah, I personally prefer to keep it a day, but I like the idea of Ken taking them around, but if that is an opportunity for them to have discussions and interview, I can see those tours taking a long time.
No, that,
And It had to have the department heads and things come here and interview the way I understood it as a panel interview forum seems to be a better use of time.
So
It-
in past
Right.
processes for city tours, it is fairly common as part of the process, because again, remember, you're trying to sell your community too. We usually conduct a group tour, and that probably would likely not take any more than an hour. I mean, we would have to
90 minutes.
hold you, Ken, to your.
It's,
So, and then, so that would be an hour to 90 minutes, and then they could come here and sit and meet with leadership staff with a cup of coffee, and it is more of an informal setting. It could be very well in this room. That too would be another 45 minutes to 60 minutes. If we do a chamber event during the lunchtime, and then we do individual, that'd be an hour to 90 minutes, then individual interviews, and then your formal interviews. It does make for a long day, but I can envision that we could get that all done. And we have done that in the past.
And that would be my preference, is to get it all done in one day. Not to be selfish here, but I'm supposed to be on vacation that week. So it would be nice to,
That's okay.
but
But
some of
still
those
give it-
things
but still
could
give it
occur
some-
on Monday and still not take
Not
away from the
involve-
council's
not involve
interview day
council,
on
yes.
Tuesday.
But you are asking them to stay overnight or drive twice.
Well,
and
when you,
that's a
well,
different
no,
issue.
that in some cases, that in taking a look at it, and I'm going back to when the city hired me, is that we came in and the city put us up in a hotel for one night that, are you, you know, not knowing where the candidates are from and how far they're gonna have to drive, are you really gonna put them, in having to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to drive to New Prague? Or are there things that you can do on that Monday where they stay overnight and they're ready to begin the interview process on Tuesday morning versus having to get up at 4 o'clock and try to drive here? And because I don't know where they're coming from,
Yeah.
I'm speculating when I say that, that's really not a major expense, that I went and got a hotel room for all of $79 a night from the local hotel so that they could stay if that's the option that you wanted to explore.
now, and Mike, that makes a lot of sense, given the location of some of the candidates. Because
Yeah.
they can meet with the city department heads, do a city tour, and then come in relaxed the next morning and.
Why don't we do that the day before? Then they can meet with leadership. Leadership can contact us or fill out their observations. That would help us.
Well, Liza would meet with them likely when
Yep.
they get done with that process. She could meet and take feedback back from them to you.
Yep. And then we'll do the rest of it the next day.
So I will work on a couple of scenarios. And
Okay.
my only other concern or caveat is that in our advertisement, we did advertise final interviews to take place on June 29th.
And keep it that way.
Yes, well, I'm meaning that I've asked our candidates to reserve June 29th, so we just need to make sure that they're available on the 28th as
28th,
well for
okay.
additional activities.
I think,
The
they're
other,
relaxed. I agree. I've been there. I've done that with the 4 o'clock in the morning years ago. And
Yes.
you get there and you're so wiped that,
Yep, exhausted.
because then you end up waiting because you got there too early and,
I think their adrenaline is flowing and I don't see that.
Right, exactly.
I've never noticed an issue with
I
that.
don't know, I've seen on, some of these candidates are all the way from Duluth.
the other piece that you haven't talked about that I offered to Liza is that.
That's my next item, the travel reimbursement.
Yeah, no, I wasn't even, no, I wasn't that. Is the opportunities that if they're bringing spouses along, is that reached out that a tour could be scheduled for the spouses with the chamber directors so that she could take them around, kind of like we did when we first brought Liza in to get familiar with the community. And the second part is I reached out to the school district to make available that if any of the spouses have children either in elementary or middle school or high school, is the school has consented and is willing to meet with any of the spouses to tour any of the schools and provide information or answer questions about the educational program and whatnot, that, you know, as she said, is that not only are we trying to convince the candidate that this is a good job for them, is that you want the spouse and the family to want to come along and be a willing participant and hopefully resident of the community. And so anything we can do so that the spouses aren't sitting back at the hotel twiddling their thumbs or anything, that we can make arrangements for that to happen as well. And I think that that's beneficial, and at least based on my experience and being involved in the processes, that was helpful to my family and myself as well.
Okay.
I think that's great.
And then you two are gonna get together and then you're gonna make the scenarios up and then we can just pick from a selection of 2 or 3 scenarios? Is that what you wanna do, or?
I will, when I return to my office, I will work on drafting a schedule that I think could work, and as well as when I speak with the candidates, just make sure that they have availability on the 28th as well, so.
Okay,
Thank you.
You bet.
thanks. The reimbursement, yes.
So, 2 questions. One, do you want to offer reimbursement? And then if the answer is yes, what are you comfortable with? And each council answers this question very differently. So some answer no, and most say yes. And then as far as options, I've seen everything from just a flat stipend. I've seen mileage reimbursement. I've seen we'll pay for your night at the hotel, and if it comes with a continental breakfast, well, then you get a breakfast and meal, or a breakfast and a night in a hotel on us. And then if we do some type of chamber event, then there's another meal too. So the sky's the limit, but this is your decision and how you defend it to your taxpayers.
Well, if there's an overnight stay, by all means, I think we should pick that up. I know that our local establishment here does offer then a breakfast as part of the room rate.
I did already make contact, and they dropped the rate from 105 down to 79. And in doing that, we would just take care of it for the 4 candidates and not go through any billing. And that would be easier on our end. So it's really a matter of mileage and meals is what you need to decide on.
Right, right.
Could we just offer a flat per diem of some sort, I mean?
Well,
For that one?
yeah, that's an option, or, you know, some individuals might be traveling further than others. So I would offer a mileage reimbursement at whatever the going rate is. Isn't it a rate at
56
the
cents.
federal level?
56
cents.
Okay,
Okay.
just because there's a variation in the travel distance. And then a cap for any on-the-road meals.
You do have 3 candidates that are coming from less than 70 miles, and then 1 that's coming well over 200 miles. So that one, I would imagine, would take you up on your offer staying overnight. The other one may as well, but your 2 ones that are closer, it may just be a mileage reimbursement.
Well, I'm fine with that.
I'm
Are
fine
you?
with it, yeah.
So offer mileage reimbursement and hotel stay if they want to
Okay.
take us up on that.
And what about any on-the-road meals, especially for those traveling
I
quite a distance?
I don't know.
I'm fine with that. We
Used to
should,
seeing it, but
and if they bring their spouse in and they wanna go to dinner, then Monday night, I mean, maybe just a flat per diem for them and spending it locally with.
Yeah, that's true.
With
Yep.
our business owners, so I would be fine with I don't know what it is, $50 for, in case there's 2 people, or.
Yeah, unless there's a standard rate that's going.
Yeah, I don't know.
There generally isn't a federal rate, that just applies to mileage, so we're pretty flexible otherwise.
I think $50 gets them.
That's what I was gonna
Gets
say,
them dinner
$50
at
per
either
diem.
Fishtail or Carboni's or El Tequila or whatever, I don't,
Because those will be the only 3 choices on Monday.
Yeah. So a $50 stipend, I would.
Yep.
I understand the spouse issue, and I totally support the idea, the concept, and it's very traditional in days past to do those types of things, but you'll navigate that from a tactful question, because that might not resonate the same way that we think it would, and it's not meant to be an obligation. And I'm a little sensitive to that issue just because
I am too.
different things that go along with that assumption. And so I get the idea, and that's how we used to do in the old days, but it's not as, to me, as common as before. But I understand the benefits and certainly want to support and trying to sell our community to the decision-making process.
Bet. And with,
But you'll deal with that.
yes, I will.
In a way that's appropriate and legal, and,
So your candidates, before they even come to interview day, will likely have already come here on a weekend and have done that work, whether it's with a partner or not. And then as far as handling it with kids' gloves, I mean, obviously, that's my concerns during the scripted questions, but those are sometimes comments that come out during the interview or the informal processes, just in casual conversation. A member of the public says, well, what hobbies do you have? Oh, I love to golf with my wife and I are both on, leagues or something. Then that generally will make its way to you. You'll hear
right,
that
we're not able
information,
to
but
ask them
you're
to bring
not.
their spouse, so.
Correct.
So I don't know how you're gonna do that, and I don't know that we want to request that you do that when we know you can't do that.
No, nope.
So,
No, I won't. I won't ask. If it comes up in their conversation, if they offer it, then that's one thing, but we do not ask.
okay,
Good.
But we're certainly capable of offering that should they happen to bring their spouse,
Mm-hmm.
we have things that we have looked at trying to put together to provide them with a tour of the community and meeting with the schools, if that's something of interest to them.
and I would go even further that once you make the initial phone call, if they want to do that ahead of time preparatory, next week, tomorrow, they can set up appointments and we can help arrange those activities and meetings with the school way before that day.
Yep.
Because normally they would have done that before that day.
Not always.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, those were all so I just want to make sure I have this clear. An overnight stay, mileage reimbursement, and $50 per diem. So is that a one-time $50, or if we're gonna turn this into a 2-day process, is it 2 days at 50?
I said that one day.
Yeah, one day. Coupon for DQ.
Love it. All right, fantastic.
Forgot DQ's open too.
Those were the business items that I had. I guess just a reminder, 1 week before I'll continue to send weekly updates, but 1 week before the interviews, you will receive another packet, just like you received last week. So again, clickable links where you'll be able to see all the info that you already have, and then the new information too. So I'll remind you to again, set aside 30 to 40 minutes to review that information so that you're prepared and ready to go on your interview day. And then maybe I'll get your other email address.
Yeah, I'll work with Ken on getting that. He sent me the thing a couple weeks ago. It's my fault. I didn't realize that was gonna be in the packet.
Can you write it down on the back of your ballot?
Sure.
Wonderful.
And Liza, if you go through this discussion, this next step, and you find out, well, now we're down to 3, and then do we do anything differently or just plow ahead? Or if we're down to 2, do we continue to plow ahead with 2 candidates? And how does that part of the process work if some people have issues or family things that pull them out of the contention?
So if it were to be 1, then I would suggest we continue plowing forward. And if the council were to not feel comfortable at the end of the interview process or at the end of your interview day, then, we can have that discussion at that time. If it was down to 2, then I would probably ask for a special council meeting just to say, do you feel still really comfortable with these 2 candidates? And then we'd still continue to plow through. And then if you were to make a decision at the end of the day that you want to invite or go deeper into the pile, we could do that as well. But I'm not anticipating that, just based on the amount of interest I've had in this position, so.
And then the candidates that are not listed, do you send out a thank you letter or something, or do we do that? or-
Actually, I call every single one of them as I'm
Okay.
leaving here tonight, so that they know where they stand.
I certainly glad we had such good response and would want to extend our appreciation for their.
You bet, you bet. Nope, share that as well. All right,
So what, the time's on the 29th. I just wanna make sure I have this. So we're planning a luncheon. Is there anything before that? I heard coffee mentioned and
I understood it was an all-day event.
all day on the 29th?
if, once I get a chance to get back to my office, I'd like to put something together. I mean, ideally, if we were to do something in a day, there'd be a tour in the morning. We can open that up to council. That's an opportunity for you to just be on there and observe, not necessarily ask questions, because you want to give that time to your staff.
I am so sorry, you guys.
But you can participate in that, and then as well, when they come back, and if they were to have a coffee or an informal setting with your leadership staff, that again would be an opportunity for you as a council to just sit and observe. You get a lot of good information from just observing as well. The chamber, if we're doing a luncheon, you would obviously be there, your individual interviews, and then your panel interview. And that's how I envision a full day. The candidates can certainly come in the day before, in the afternoon, and spend the night here and get comfortable and meet with whoever they feel comfortable meeting with throughout the day. I usually give them that contact information and encourage them to schedule those appointments, because I think it just makes for a better candidate. And yeah, and I just think they present themselves better in front of the council when they know the community. So that's how I would envision it, but I guess once I get back to my office and
Yep.
have a chance to put it on paper.
Understand.
See from there. Okay, well, great.
Okay,
Thank you for your time.
thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, Liza.
Yeah, Liza. They're right. Okay, we don't need to take any formal action on that, so next up is the resolution approving a variance. Ken Ondich is up on that, and if anybody's gonna speak to this, I'll ask him to come up, or I'll recognize him and ask him to come up to the podium. And, you'll have to state your name and address, if you wanna speak, so. Ken?
Yep, I just got a PowerPoint, Mitch, can you pop up my computer? All right, so, this item is one that, is being forwarded from the planning commission meeting, excuse me, last week. And this is variance B3 2021, and it's a garage setback to the side yard. And the applicant is Terry Von Bank. So, Mr. Von Bank resides at 313 Pershing Avenue North. And again, he applied for this variance to allow his detached garage to be 3 feet from side lot line instead of the ordinance required 6 feet. What he's proposing to put on the property is a 24 by 32 garage, which would replace an existing 16 by 22 foot garage. It's basically just a single stall garage with the new double stall garage. It's notable that the existing garage is actually a little bit closer to the lot line than what the new one would be, and that was at 2.7 feet from that same side property line that he's applying for the variance to be only 3 feet from tonight. At the planning commission meeting, we talked about the factors and the practical difficulties that the applicant specifically noted in placing that garage less than the normal 6 foot setback requirement. Specifically, the practical difficulties that the applicant noted were wanting to continue to utilize the driveway and have the edge of the garage line up with the existing driveway, keeping separation between the open area, the garden and fire pit, which is kind of on the north side of the lot, and then the garage on the south portion of the lot. And then also the having enough room for that, basically that second width of that second garage stall to access the garage and get around the house and into the garage and out of the garage at without much difficulty. And we'll show you that on the survey here in a second. We didn't have a formal public hearing. We don't require those for variances, but we did have one letter received, and then one property owner, Mr. Steve Cromie, who resides just to the south at the property next door at 311 Pershing Avenue North, who noted concerns about the variance, specifically about grading and drainage, as reasons not to approve the variance. In response to the concerns of Mr. Cromie at the meeting, 2 conditions were added during the discussion.
specifically and included in the planning commission's recommendation for approval, which included requiring gutters to be added on both sides of the garage, the north and the south side. The south side adjoining Mr. Cromie's property, and then the north side obviously being between the fire pit and garden area and the garage. And then also removing some concrete behind the garage and regrading to the alley with the downspouts facing towards the alley. So those were obviously specific conditions meant to address the concerns of the drainage. The planning commission did recommend approval to be forwarded to city council meeting here tonight on a 4-0 vote. And we'll go over some air photos and other details as we go along here. So on the overhead, you can see the existing garage, which is that one stall garage. And in red, basically what I did was just outline the size of and placement of the new garage, just so you get a general idea of how that would look on the air photo. But the actual detailed exhibit is the survey that Mr. Von Bank provided, showing the proposed garaging, the existing garage, also kind of as a dotted outline here. So again, this is slightly further away from the lot line than the existing garage, but negligible between the two. And then obviously, excuse me, it extends further towards the alley, being about 12.4 feet from the rear lot line in that case of where it's proposed. At the planning commission meeting, one of the questions is why can't the garage be slid over? While number one, reducing the area between the garden and the garage, and it would leave room for a walking path. What it does is actually pushes that garage stall further to the north and makes it more difficult. You probably can't see my pointer. I wish you could see my pointer. Backing out of that garage stall, you would get close to, there's kind of a covered porch and deck, and it would make maneuvering through that more difficult. And then obviously would misalign the garage with the edge of the driveway as it exists today. So again, these are practical difficulty items, which is the current standard, not an undue hardship, which had been the previous standard in the variant statutes. So as I noted, the staff and planning commission both recommended approval to have this detached garage to be 3 feet instead of the 6 feet from the side lot line. And that's in accordance with the resolution in the packet, again noting the two added conditions to alleviate the drainage concerns with the gutters and regrading and removal of the concrete towards the alley behind the garage. So some more photos here to take a look at. So you can see the current driveway and the garage basically align on that south edge of the property there. And that is what the applicant wishes to maintain. It's just basically widening the garage and adding depth to it for the dual stall garage. These photos here, the one in the upper left, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a pink property marker kind of in the foreground near the alley, and then you can see kind of a concrete curb, as the applicant called it at the planning commission meeting, but I'm not quite sure what that is for. But that would be removed. That area would be regraded. There's about 1.75% fall from the front edge of the garage where it would be reconstructed to the alley that could provide very compliant drainage, can't talk tonight, drainage and grading back towards the alley, obviously not providing any additional flow back up towards the applicant or the neighboring property here, because you can see there's a fence further up between the driveway and the neighbor's house there, and that's actually right on the property line. So again, the grade goes towards the alley from the garage area. Generally speaking, the drainage pattern is actually from north to south. One thing that was brought up at the planning commission meeting was the general drainage pattern of the area goes basically across that driveway and into the neighboring property, but it really has nothing to do with the garage. It's a condition that's been there for 70 years since these homes were built back in the 1950s. So this garage will not add to that concern for the drainage, and again, we're adding these mitigating conditions onto there. Picture on the kind of the right side of the overhead there, you can see a couple of stakes in the green grass. That would be the north edge of the garage, and you can see the edge of that basically it was lining up with that bedroom window on the house, and then you've got landscape materials and other impediments as you kind of got to fit your way around the house and get back to the single driveway, drive aisle, and then back to provision. So moving that even another 3 feet further to the north to meet that 6-foot side yard setback would just add to the difficulty. Again, establishing the practical difficulty in utilizing the garage. Couple more photos. Here's that fence I was speaking about previously. One thing regarding snow removal was brought up at the planning commission meeting. The applicant noted that he shovels and moves the snow over to the garden area. And again, leaving that area between the garden and the garage open for that separation, and again, drainage back towards the alley will benefit both parties in this case. And you can kind of see that existing cobblestone or flagstone walkway out to the fire pit in between the garden area. So again, while there would be physically room to scoot that over about 3 feet, again, you're just closer into the impediments of backing out of the garage and, you know, making your way around the house to the driveway. Then a couple of final photos here, just the alley in the backyard, another view from the applicant's porch and rear deck area. And finally, an oblique aerial photo. Again, you can see the single stall detached garage and that driveway. And we had a variance a few years back for a home further to the south on this block for an addition to a attached garage. And again, you had that situation where these homes were built in the 50s. The driveway is existing. The house kind of, you know, pushes the driveway to the limits of that south edge of the property, and that's really what you're working with. Without picking up and moving the house, you have limited ability to, again, access around that into the backyard and get to the garage and utilize that existing driveway. So again, trying to establish the practical difficulty of the situation, not an undue hardship. Then a certificate, certificate of survey again, just to follow up. And I know I did receive some photos from neighboring property owner today, Mr. Cromie, and I could just put those up real quickly for you. Mr. Cromie, I don't know if you had specific items to address in these photos, but here they are for the council's benefit. Scroll through them quickly. Similar photos to what I had shown before. This one you can see that pink property marker right up in the corner again and heading back to the fence. So this is the curbing that would be removed. This would be regraded back towards the alley, and then the gutters would be on that side of the garage and the north side, and then dump back towards the alley as well.
Does the alley carry water? Is there a swell in it that goes to the end of this, to the street?
There's general drainage, I keep saying that, drainage that grades to the south in general in this whole neighborhood from basically the north end of the block all the way to the south.
So if
It's
you
not
do,
a swale per se in the alley for the drainage, but yes, it flows that direction.
but if you do create drainage to the alley, it would go somewhere then?
It would go down the alley.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very gradual, it's a very flat area. Even the grade across these yards is well under 2%. I think it's closer to 1%. So it's not a ton of grade heading that direction, but the grade from the front edge of that garage to the existing alley is about a 2%. And this would, obviously with the gutters and everything, further divert that rather than onto the neighboring property if you didn't have gutters. So those were the 3 photos that Mr. Cromie provided here today. Let me just put the survey back up. I did want to note the applicant, Mr. Von Bank, is also in attendance.
Okay, any questions of the council?
I don't have any. I think, Ken, thank you for clarifying the gutter and the extra grading. If it was in your memo, I didn't catch it, because I was going to ask what was done to address Mr. Cromie's letter. So thank you for clarifying.
I don't know if you can kind of see in the survey, it's probably hard to see, but you got, half a foot of fall from kind of the back edge of the house to the front of the garage. And then you have another, almost 1 foot from the front edge of the garage to the edge of the gravel driveway there. It was about pretty close to 2% gradage, drainage and grading back to the east.
So was there, Steve, was there something that, those photos that you'd submitted, was there an issue that you had, or there was a question, or?
Yeah, come on up.
I'll go back to the first photo here.
Steve Cromie, 311 Pershing Avenue. The first picture there clearly shows he's building a shed close to his garden. Less room for his snow now. The second photo, that the stake in the dirt there is but the back of his garage he's proposing to build. Why can't he get closer to the alley like all the other garages? And he'd have more room to come around his house with his vehicles.
2.7 feet further, well, on the one southeast corner, there's 2.7 feet that come back. On the, there's a minimum setbacks 10 feet there, so at this point, or it was actually 12.4 feet on that northeast corner. It's probably closer to 12, so I would say no more than 2 feet it could potentially slide back, which would provide a little more room.
But Steve,
That's the minimum.
that looked like it was far away from the house, though. Wasn't your concern at the planning meeting that you're getting the snow melts and the water runoff is going into your basement somehow?
Yes.
But that's at the back of, I mean, your house is way up there. I mean, I don't know, you're not getting any runoff.
No, I'm not getting any runoff from there. My concern is he's building this garage, no place for the snow to go. Where's he gonna put the snow? Alongside my on his property, alongside my house. When it melts, it's in my basement.
But Terry, if I remember the planning commission, you said you would plow towards the garden or whatever, trying to alleviate some of that runoff and whatnot. Although that didn't make it into the conditional use permit, would that be a condition that, I know that he was very amenable to like the gutters and whatnot, but I mean.
That's a difficult one. That's controlling an action of an individual rather than a physical improvement on a property.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
That'd be a very difficult one to enforce because you wouldn't be able to, I don't know how you would enforce that in the long run, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, generally, in the legal sense, what we say, work together in good faith to resolve the issue. And if you have a plan to move the snow closer to your garden and fire pit, so that when it does melt, there's less runoff into the neighbor's yard, I mean, you can just do the best that you can. That's all we can ask.
If I may.
Yep, come on up.
Terry Von Bank, 313 Pershing applicant. So I can explain, a few things that should clarify. Let's deal with the snow issue first. So, I have a 60-foot wide lot. It's very narrow. And I can talk about a little history between my neighbor to the south and me regarding this snow issue, which will certainly explain a lot, and what's been done since. So, up until 2 years ago, the fence I installed last fall, and so there's only one direction for the snow to go for along the fence, which would be from the northeast corner of Mr. Cromie's house to the east. So my new snow removal practice this year, which is with the snow blower, is to go east and northeast, and it all goes into the garden. As far as the shed, that's just to the west of my garden. I removed the snow from that area every winter anyway, just to alleviate any potential flooding problems in the summer or in the winter or spring, and that snow went into my garden. So the shed is not an issue. Going east or west with the snow, there was a time when Mr. Cromie asked me if I could blow the snow against the north side of his house for insulation. Well, I did. But since that time, and he mentioned, well, I get water problems from it. Not a problem. I actually took the snow blower and I removed it all right down to the grass so he wouldn't have spring flooding problems. And ever since then, all the snow gets blown directly westward, and I blow through blown snow continually to move all the snow to the street and left and right on my property on the grass. So the area between the homes, actually, there's no snow. And that's the only way to do it, to provide any potential flooding problems for him and to alleviate any buildup of snow. And it works quite well. So that problem's been resolved. Now, the fence area, starting from the back corner of his house to where my new garage, proposed garage would be, the grade on that is substantial enough where it's, my old garage and new garage is not causing any flooding. There's only one place for the water to run, and that's east to the alley. But the gutters was in my construction plans anyway, because it's just the right thing to do, and I don't want any flooding around my garage. Plus, I don't want any water sitting around my new foundation. So, you know, I could have provided some photos, I guess, but I know that Steve's had some issues with flooding in his basement, and he has a sump pump that runs quite regularly, and I know that on the very east side of his house, he has the old-fashioned exterior entrance and stairs going into his basement, which he's complained about in the past, and it's got to get fixed because it keeps taking in water. Well, I mean, that's beyond my control, but on my property, I'm doing everything for proper flow of water. And when the construction begins, the contractor and I have sat down and we've met, and we know exactly how we're gonna regrade. Once the concrete's removed and all the fill is brought in and it's brought up to grade, the direction of the water is gonna be better than it's ever been. And it's not only gonna help Mr. Cromie, it's gonna help myself. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, concerns? Otherwise, I would take a motion to approve this recommendation of the Planning Commission.
I'll make a motion to approve variance V32021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Bruce made the second, Maggie made the first. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the squad car camera installation and deployment. Chief?
I just wanted to give the council an update on the installation and deployment of the squad cameras. At a previous council meeting, through the council support, we were able to get some funding for it. And on our May 18th and 19th, they were installed. And since that time, we had a little transition time to practice with them, use them. The officers were able to get comfortable with the software that is set up on the squad computer.
that talks to the cameras. They're able to start them with the touch screen, or physically start the cameras. The rear-facing camera is started manually, either by the software or touching the control box for it. The first picture here is from outside the vehicle. The camera is mounted up off the roof, just on the passenger side of the rearview mirror. It's a small unit. Again, very easy to access. The lower part of it is where you can activate it. You turn it on when you get in. And as you log into your Windows profile, and then open up the Axon interface, it will pick up your body worn camera, through Bluetooth connection, and that camera, so they come up on the screen, because you've already joined them. And then also, there is a rear-facing camera, if you wanna go to the next pic. The rear-facing camera is just a view of the seat itself, the rear seat. So if you do place anybody in there, they would be on camera. It has a night vision infrared that, if it is completely dark, they come out gray, like a night vision type thing. So it's very, very nice angle, good quality, 1080 for resolution, and each camera has its own audio also. But by pairing up your body cam, when that audio is going, and ultimately if all three cameras were going, you were able to extract all of those cameras together and bring them together. And then the audio is overlaid so that you hear one audio with everything playing then. So a very nice system, works very well. Again, most of the officers got very comfortable here in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, of being able to manage those cameras. The next picture, that is the control unit that's mounted in front of the cage on the passenger side, on the pillar there. If you're gonna bring somebody in to transport somebody, you'd bring them over to there, place them in, buckle them in, then you're able just to reach in and start that camera going. More than likely in that event, because you're having contact, if you took somebody into custody, that might be some use of force, so you would have your body cam rolling already with that. Next picture. One might have to think what this is. Oh, this is the one down below. Oh, that's just another picture of that control. The other one was with a flash. This one was with no flash. So you're actually, same mounted by the pillar there in front of the cage, and you're looking through the back window there behind that.
Okay.
Where it's mounted. This one is behind the seat on the passenger side. That is going down to the bottom of the cage. Down there is mounted our cradle point. That is the router that has our cellular connection. And from the router, there's a regular Ethernet cable that connects to the computer. All of these recordings are brought to the computer in the software, and then they're stored there until they go and download. So it is downloaded essentially through that router then. The next picture is further up above that, where those two red ones are battery packs that power the cameras and the router. When the car is running, those battery packs are getting charged. But in the event you shut your car down, they can run for a couple of hours on those battery packs. And then the module above that is just a control unit that makes sure the cameras are talking and directs the video where it needs to go to. So some very nice technology. Again, works very well. This is a little video, just a 3-minute snippet. We can start that, and it just shows this officer is driving. He saw a vehicle that he knew that the driver was revoked. It was familiar to him. So he's driving right now. We have as a policy in our policy, and then procedurally, we set it that it has various actions that you can start the camera automatically. One of those would be if you flip the gun lock switch, if you turn on the red lights, if you hit a certain predetermined speed, it'll automatically come on. So some of those triggers happen. As you're watching this, you will see that right at 1 minute into the video, right in here, he activated his lights. So it went back and took that 1 minute of buffer, which was something we talked about, that minute would be good to be able to provide some of those driving conducts. That if he was following a vehicle that was weaving or crossing the center line or the fog line, that would generally be picked up then.
So what we watched was the buffer
Yes.
prior to.
Yep, it went automatic, because, yeah, when you saw the red lights come on, that's when he started the camera, but it took that. And on the buffer part of it, it does not record audio for that. So it's just video playing then. He makes his way up to the vehicle here and is ready to, well, he's talking to him, and that's where the squad camera, or the body worn camera, then starts its activation, and he works through it. Now I tried to blur out the individual, and I actually redacted the audio of this part. You'll hear a little audio at that. What are we
I
gonna?
don't know if we'll hear the audio through here.
Through yours? If you take it back to, well, we can let it play out first.
So you can redact stuff too.
You can, like his face there, you can go through a redaction studio, but yeah, you blur out the faces. If I have a request for video and audio by our body worn camera, it is by statute what it's classified as in data privacy. If I don't have permission of everybody in the video, I would have to redact some of those individuals out then.
Okay.
And you do that, the officers themselves don't have any control over the.
Yeah, they wouldn't be releasing any information or any data like that. I would do that, or sergeant would do it, or a technician would do it. Our records department is trained in it also.
But the individual officer cannot, tamper with it whatsoever?
No, they can't erase, they can't do anything. They can view it, because it's gonna be helpful for them to do their report with it. So that's what they would use it for only. And all officers have this evidence.com account that they log into to manage their data and their evidence.
If this was gonna get used in a court, then how would what's that process? Is that, evidentiary, go straight to the courts and the officer never touches it or nothing?
Yes, we can, like the prosecuting attorney, whether it's joint prosecution or this, Scott County or Lesueur County attorney, we can share it with their Axon account, and they can have it uploaded right in, and they can view it through their evidence.com account then. So it works well for that. We're not burning discs and doing that. Once we give that to them, in the past, we would have to we would have to burn several CDs for the defense and this person and that person. Now we just share with them, they take care of distributing it from there then.
I noticed, as the officers approaching, maybe I didn't catch it. It didn't seem the body cam was on yet at that time until he approached the vehicle itself.
Yeah,
So it was very difficult for me to see any of the action from the automobile camera. It was far enough away and the color of the car is dark and the officer's color is dark. So it's hard to make out any activity until the body cam turned on. So I don't know are you positioning, experimenting with positioning the car in different ways to make sure the camera is the best view of the circumstances? Or like in this case, if you didn't have the body cam going there, you wouldn't have noticed if there was a gun drawn as an example or something else in the camera.
yep, and it looks like he activated a little slowly. He probably made the contact first and then made it. That would go back 30 seconds.
So you're not gonna rely on the vehicle necessarily, you're automatically.
No.
In this
no,
circumstance, you
yeah,
want the
they're-
body, okay.
They have to supplement one another, and in this case, he probably could have done that a little earlier, because he would have had this whole approach then. Again, it's good evidence, it shows, shows the scene. In evidence.com, these are separate videos. I just coupled them together and extracted it and then cut out, I think it was 19 minutes and some seconds. So I just took a 3-minute spot of that. But if you take it back to right at 2 minutes. Yeah, right at 2 minutes. It does pick up some good detail. You see a rodent coming in front of the squad car, walks over to the building, and then scoots all the way across the wall. Not real evidentiary stuff, but it does pick up details that you're not gonna know. And actually, when I was looking at it large, it walked out, it went to the wall, then peeked around, and then went up at the wall and just scooted all the way across.
I'm curious, have we used any body camera footage for prosecutions yet?
Yes, yep. Yeah, a lot of times defense will ask for body worn camera footage, and if it's obvious on a DWI case or something that the party is intoxicated and it doesn't show well for them, they will plead to it.
So you feel we've gotten benefits from this?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yep.
Jim, the buffering is a minute, standard, or, cause you can do up to what, 3 minutes, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I thought we could do 2 minutes, but when he came and installed, the minute is the max we can do.
It is, okay,
And we can do 2 minutes on our body worn cameras.
okay.
And that too, we started with 30 seconds, and I know we had that discussion about, hey, what's important for our evidentiary findings? To date, that has been adequate then.
Okay.
But yeah, I was a little surprised about the audio with this, because the installer said, he's a technician that said, no, this doesn't do the audio. So that's what it's set at right now. But yeah, very nice, good quality. Very pleased with it. I appreciate the support for it.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the city property at 101 Main Street West. City Administrator Mike Johnson, it says.
Enclosed in your packet tonight is the information that was requested to be brought back, and that was like Councilmember Ryan had asked the council, and council's direction was to bring back the encroachment agreement with Mark Michelle from the Pioneer Saloon And that encroachment agreement, as I conveyed in the packet of information that I provided you, is that that was developed when the city bought the vacant lot from Mr. Gary Staber in 2019, based on the financial donation provided from Dr. Michael and Kay Wilcox. And when we did this survey back in April of 2019 by SEH, it was discovered and determined that the east wall of the Pioneer Saloon building encroached into the Staber property by about 1.06 feet on the north end of the east side of the building and about 0.97 feet on the south. And the approximate length of the encroachment is about 50 feet 2 inches, as the staff has been able to approximately measure out. Then when we put the purchase agreement together with Mr. Staber, the city attorney's office developed the encroachment agreement that spelled out what would happen both currently, going back to 2019, and going forward on what would happen relative if the east wall needed to be replaced or taken care of at some future point in the future. And that I've basically identified is that if that east wall needed to be replaced, is that it would be required to meet the setbacks then in effect at that time. So as we're talking about, that's give or take about a 1 foot encroachment. I know the concern by Mr. Michelle and Mark's in the audience here tonight in taking a look at that is that he would be required, or the future purchaser of the building would be required to comply with the setbacks unless otherwise determined by the council, then in effect at that time. But there's nothing that precludes him from basically doing any maintenance on the property at the present time, or anything on that east wall on anything that he needs to do. If he were to sell the building, the agreement would run with the property and would be the same for whoever purchased the property. There would be no change in any of the requirements associated with that. Mark did agree to provide or grant the city the right to utilize the entire portion of the eastern wall, which is encroaching, for the purposes of constructing a mural thereupon, and to create, maintain, alter, and remove the mural painted on the encroachment at any time in the future. He would not contribute to any painting or maintenance of that east wall. That if that was something we wanted to do, it would have to be at our expense. And so that was the purpose of having that encroachment agreement. I did call and talk to Mark that since I hadn't heard anything other than what Councilmember Ryan had indicated at the meeting, that he had had a conversation. So I called Mark on Friday and we had a conversation about it, and he explained what his concern was, and that if he were to try to have us proceed with this, is that the cost of undertaking the sale of the property back to him would involve a number of costs, and he said he was willing to pay a reasonable fee, albeit neither one of us knows exactly what that fee would be, because you've got for us to number one, determine the slight value of that approximate 1 foot by 50 foot encroachment is likely going to be a relatively small number. But you've got to get into trying to do the surveying, and then we've got to work through Ken's office with a minor subdivision to subdivide that parcel or that piece off the parcel that we own, to do title work and the paperwork, and to be able to run that through the process, and then to put together the purchase agreement and scheduling the closing and the recording of all of these documents with Scott County. That in talking to the city attorney today, he's guessing in his mind that for us to do all of this, is likely in the range of $5,000 to $10,000. And I've not even had a chance to share that with Mark, and as long as it wasn't 50 or 100,000, he seemed interested in doing this, or at least us trying to convey to him what we think those costs were. I don't have a finely detailed assessment other than just a quick discussion with the city attorney's office in trying to take a look at the legal documents, subject to getting the survey and, having to put together the minor subdivision. So there is an awful lot of work involved to turn back this 1 foot by 50 foot piece of property to Mr. Michelle. However, if he's willing to pay that cost, that certainly can be done, because as part of that sale of the property back to him, he indicated a willingness to accept as a condition of the sale the inclusion of those items out of the encroachment agreement regarding the abilities to be able to either paint or put a mural on that east wall, but again, it would not be at his expense. So that's where the matter stands as of tonight, and so the intent was to come in and find out the council's willingness or lack of willingness to proceed to sell the property. I have my own personal ideas whether this is necessary or not, and that what would come into play, there's nothing that causes him any current issues unless he's not sleeping at night worrying about that 1 foot strip that somebody else, might buy in the next deal. But if that is a concern and the council is willing to sell it and provided he pay for all the costs, then I would say we could potentially proceed on that basis. But there is an awful lot of work to go through to do this. This isn't just simply sign a piece of paper and deed that property to him. There's a lot of steps that we have to go through to be able to make this happen.
Okay.
So would this delay the construction of the?
No.
Mark, do you wanna say anything?
70,000, isn't it? 70,000 just to, get that one piece of prop, or, 1 foot off from the other lot?
No.
Where'd you get 60 or 70,000?
No.
That's
He
right.
said
For 10.
10, that's something else. That's the engineering for the, I think you're.
Mark, you can come up and,
Yeah, come
We're on
on.
item A, Rick.
You're,
Only
you're
item
looking
A.
at another part.
The encroachment agreement goes with item A.
All right, I got it.
Mark Mitchell, owns the Pioneer Saloon. My main concern about this is something happens to the wall. Upper, lower, the wall has to be replaced onto my property. So my concern, if the part of the upper wall something would happen, then I would have to move everything all in. And I got a small building the way it is. I really can't afford to lose that space, and that's why the wall got built where it was in the first place. I made an agreement with the building owner, Joe Geiger, to make it a common wall. I had no idea about this until the property got sold, that this was on you guys' property. I thought it was a common wall. My main concern is I cannot lose that footage inside my building. And that's why I brought it up.
and you're okay with that $5,000 to $10,000?
Yeah, if we don't go over 10, that's fine.
Well, I don't think we have a way of saying that, but I mean,
Don't know.
if you want
We
the
don't know.
council's approval, I think the council would say that it's gonna, all the costs are gonna be incurred by you, as this, the taxpayers aren't gonna
Right, I understand
help
that.
solve your problem, I mean, that's.
Right.
So,
When I talked to Mr. Johnson, he would give me some kind of ballpark figure before we proceed with this, but.
And we have not had a chance that I got this late this afternoon.
Understand.
And that's without specifically trying to go out and individualize each of the different items. Have not talked with the surveyor. I was just trying to, in discussion with the city attorney, taking a look at all of the elements beyond simply determining the value of the property, what little bit there is for that 50 foot by 1 foot strip. We can get the survey guesstimate, we can get that, and then it's a matter of going through all of the other, the sales agreement and the legal paperwork that the city attorney would put us through, as well as the title work that has to be done to sell commercial property. You know, so we have to go through, even though this is a small piece of property, we have to go through the same steps as if this was almost a commercial building. And because we've got to go through the minor subdivision process where we're splitting off a piece of property that we have, that's Ken's bailiwick. I'd have to follow,
That's the administrative process, there's a $300 fee for that, but, the survey would cover all the required legal, description and all that work, so pretty straightforward on that.
So Mike, if let's say a car ran that intersection and hit that wall and it fell down or was damaged substantially, it would have to be rebuilt, not where it is now on part of the city property. That wall would move inside, and that was what Mark's problem is. Is that your understanding too? If that
under the agreement that you've got spelled out
Yeah.
on the subrogation, now, item number 4 on page 3, in the event that the building located on Mark's property is destroyed, any new building shall be constructed in such a way that it avoids any future encroachment onto the property.
Okay, all right,
So it spells out what has to happen if something were to happen, and that the term, where was it? I was thinking that,
no, well, that answered my question, I think.
My main concern is something happens to the upper part of the wall, then I gotta move the bottom footing, I gotta move the basement wall,
Yep.
I gotta do everything.
Right.
I understand more now than I did before.
and there's no question that back when that restaurant burned and he rebuilt that wall, that, you know, it was likely presumed or assumed that something else might build and that they would end up having a joint common wall. Well, that property has sat vacant now for how many years, where nothing has happened?
15, 16.
Yeah, is that, yeah.
So a significant period of time. It's in a very visible downtown location to the community, and it hasn't been probably the best showing vacant lot in the downtown, and where there's been no activity. I don't think between Ken and my office in the last 13 years that we've had any inquiries on the purchase and or development of anything on that parcel. So it hasn't garnered or generated any interest from a building standpoint. And so you had the offer of the donation back in 2019, and the council accepted it from the Wilcoxes to move forward to try to turn it into something substantially different from the perspective of maybe Central Plaza in the downtown. I don't want to call it a park because it's not a park, but it'll be an attractive area with seating and benches and landscaping and lighting, a rotary clock and other things that I think the community can be proud of, and to attempt to incorporate some of the same landscaping and streetscaping that we'll have in the Highway 19 project can also be brought into this parcel. All in a way to try to make it attractive for use by many community members.
And Mark, and you're okay with putting language in there that allows the city to paint their mural
Oh, yeah, I
against
told
that?
him that on the phone, yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure that, and then what happens if that building's sold, let's say 5 years from now you sell, would that be,
The language that
Would
we
still be
have
locked in,
in the
okay.
sale of the property to him would retain those conditions, and we would record that document at the courthouse so that anybody buying it in the future, in their title work, they're gonna pick up the terms and conditions associated with the sale of the property back to
It's in
Michelle.
perpetuity.
okay, all right, I got it,
so.
all right. I just wanted
Gotcha.
to verify that.
So what do you need, a consensus from us, or?
Well, no, I would need an action
Okay.
to have us, to have staff move forward, to develop the necessary, sales contract, to sell back this 50-foot by 1-foot strip of property, to Mark. And that he be responsible for 100% of the costs associated, with that transaction. As I told him before we would attempt to proceed, I would try to get him a more detailed estimate. And what I gave him, or he just heard here a little bit ago, is more than what we talked about on Friday, because I didn't have the opportunity to get the city attorney's input, but, you know, he just didn't want it to be $50,000 or $100,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Makes
And I said it certainly wouldn't be anywhere near that neighborhood, but I likewise knew it was gonna be, you know, somewhere in this likely ballpark, but, you know, until I'm able to do enough of the individual pieces to itemize it out and to solicit, proposals or information, I couldn't give them any better than what I'm guesstimating right here from the city attorney.
Okay.
And another one of my concerns was if I ever sell the building, I tell the guy that's buying the building, well, I own the wall, but I don't own land under it. And something happens to the wall, you're gonna have to move it in. Well, he goes, well, I don't want the building, you know?
Sure.
Sure, yeah.
It makes sense. I never thought it that, so,
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time.
yes.
Thank you.
Well, I'll make that motion of Mike's, if I can parlay that, use that
You
verbatim.
remember what you said?
It's fine.
I'll second that too.
We'll go back and watch the video.
Is that good enough, or do you want me to try to muddle my way through it? And make-
Well, I think I've got it pretty well,
Okay.
on the second page, that, your review and authorization to work with Mr. Michelle to sell him the encroachment area contained with the city's lot
Okay,
at his at 100% his cost.
perfect. Okay, so Sean made the motion, Rick seconded it. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
I think Ken, oh no, I didn't put that up there, that, on the back of the materials on that encroachment agreement is, Ken had a copy of the east wall up there, but on the very back page, for those of you that hadn't seen it,
Yep.
there's a copy of what that rotary clock is, that the Rotary Club has, gone out and they've, generated the funding, to acquire that four-phase clock to kind of put on the, corner, of the lot there at Main and Central, and then whether it's painting or something else, anything that we would propose to want to do on the east wall, whether I'm here or not, would certainly encourage any prior conversation before anything is done with Mr. Mark Michelle of Pioneer to ensure that there's nothing that he's adamantly opposed to or would not want something to reflect negatively on his business operation. And I don't think that would be too difficult to do at a later date. And those are just some of the textures that the one committee that was kind of working on different things was just looking at and talking about, and whether it's a textured substance or whether it's a mural or whether it's just painted, none of that's been determined at this point.
Correct. All right, you wanna go and talk about the agreement with SEH then?
The second part, and I want to make sure that, I'm sure a couple of you may be gagged when you looked at the price associated with this one. I probably didn't do as good a job in explaining within the content of the memo, and thought that I could just kind of do it tonight, that when you take a look at this, is a proposal from SEH to assist with engineering, architectural services for developing the Central Plaza concept. That what you have up on the screen that was included in your packet is, if you remember, we had kind of two different committees working from 18 to 19. We had a downtown 15-member committee that was involved in helping develop streetscape, landscaping, and lighting for the entire corridor for the downtown project. Maggie was on that committee. And then there was 14 other individuals from throughout the community that took a look at all aspects of the streetscape, and some of those are included in this material. That when you took a look at waste baskets or bike racks or benches or the lighting or flower pots or fencing or anything like that. And here's a good example of what's gonna go over in the vicinity, I think across from the post office, somewhere in the vicinity, just slightly west of where the new roundabout and the pedestrian crossing will be, just west of First Avenue, that some of those limestone blocks and some of that committee made a formal presentation to the council back in the spring of 2019. I'm trying to remember how many of you were here and on the council at that time. I think, Sean, you were, Maggie, you were, Rick, were you back in at that
Yep,
time when
me
they
and
came
Bruce
in
were
and
here too.
presented?
I was the only one that
And
wasn't.
Bruce except Dwayne. And the council formally accepted that, and that's what we ended up including in the plans and specs when we bid out the highway project and took bids in April of 2020. In 2019 is when former council member Kay Wilcox came forward with the offer to provide the city with a donation to be able to buy this vacant lot in an effort to undertake some improvements to try to clean up the corner here at Central and Main Street. And so that enabled us to go out and to be able to buy this property essentially at no cost to the city. At that time, we also started working with another committee that was taking a look at, okay, how could we go about attempting to develop a concept of what could this parcel look like with either shrubbery or trees or benches or seating. We've got utilities coming into it from both watering and electric, because the clock will need electricity. Bruce will likely have a fiber line that runs through this property coming to City Hall and connecting all the way back to the power plant. And so some of the concepts and things that the committee came up with in 2019 is that report was just about ready to come to the council's table at the first meeting in April of last year when the COVID stuff hit. And we've kind of just let it kind of sit on the sideline while we've been doing everything with the construction project. And so in order to rejuvenate it and to try to work together, they had free landscaping assistance provided by a lady that worked with the volunteer committee, and Maggie was on that committee, so I'll let her add to or supplement any of the information that I'm trying to provide. But that committee, in taking a look at with the individual's name, her name was Jen Crava, you know, and trying to work with them, with the volunteer group, trying to figure out, you know, basic concepts and different ideas and what can be done. We have to make sure that it's ADA compliant, that we can handle snow removal, that maintenance isn't a major issue, that we can withstand summer and winter conversion, and that just because we change seasons doesn't do anything to, you know, to cause upheavals or problems. So there's still a fair amount of work to go through, but at the time they were doing their work, we had just come up with the presentation of the council on what was going in the downtown, but they were done separately, and so they really weren't able or didn't integrate because they were kind of, you know, kind of free planning it, so to speak, and, you know, being as visionary as they could. And as we took a look at this with our engineers and trying to take a look at how could we attempt to try to put something together, there were a number of concerns. Specifically on the north end, where it ties into the parking lot, we are likely gonna have to specifically set aside, Ken, that whole white area there, we're gonna have to put handicapped accessible parking, because we don't technically have enough on the streets in front of some of the businesses. However, in attempting to meet the required number of spaces for MnDOT's planning purposes throughout the entire corridor, and because there's always the commentary, well, you put those in and nobody ever uses them or whatnot, we're also able to take that right off the street system and are able to put it out on the north end of the gravel parcel, is we will specifically designate that for handicap parking, because not everybody, as you recall, when we went through all of the public hearings and the process and everything, nobody wanted to lose parking in front of their business. The roundabouts, whether it was roundabouts or whether it was gonna be streetlights, was gonna result in the loss of some parking in the intersection area. And so one way to attempt to address the handicap parking is to reserve and designate stalls on the very north end of this parcel that we have to help us meet part of our requirements for handicap parking. But anything we put through there for a walkway, we have to make sure that it's ADA compliant, so that people in wheelchairs or, you know, that have walking issues or concerns, that, you know, we have to make sure that it doesn't cause any issues there. We gotta get the utilities in. And so to do the design and do the workup, we got the proposal from SCH, and what I failed to do, and I wish I had, is that I would have broken down the costs for the various task components in the agreement. But to just give you a general idea in there that task one is the preliminary design, and then task two is the design development. Those items coupled together is right at about $15,000. So when you take a look at the whole cost of the SEH proposal, the preliminary work from a design standpoint to, you know, to work with city staff and the committee to take a look at what's been developed, to take a look at what we've got in the streetscape and the landscaping downtown. How do we put that together so that we can do a layout that's done to the surveyed piece of property like we do in any street construction project, that we're able to develop that concept, and the intent would not be to go out and develop one, two, or three. It would be to go back and meet with them and with city staff and to try to bring the council a preliminary concept of what could and should be done on this parcel, recognizing, you know, when are the uses? Well, you have people that walk into downtown now, either coming and going from the bakery or Patty's Place or whatnot. There is no place to really sit downtown and sit on a bench and enjoy your cup of coffee or a sandwich or something. When you look at, in September, we've got Dojinki, and, you know, where is the beer garden and where is the band? And, you know, if we develop seating in there, people can sit in this plaza area. When we have parades, where do people stand and watch the parade? It's up at the intersection, or if it's the Memorial Day one, they line up here at City Hall and go down Central and then go back down Main Street. So there are ways to incorporate that into various multiple uses. And so in the first part of the project, the task would be the preliminary design and the design development. Then that concept plan and the cost estimates would come back to the council before proceeding with any of the other steps under the engineering agreement with SEH. The construction documents, which is preparing those plans and specs and sheets and technical specifications on the bidding, you know, that's probably the most significant part of it, and that's about $33,000 in total. And then you've got about $2,300,000 for the bidding in task four, and then about 8.7 on construction support services. So when you take a look at the overall project cost estimate of the agreement, I guess I wanted to tell you that that's not all spent up front. And so the first piece that would come to you on task one and two is right at or just slightly under $15,000 to do that work. And so we would attempt to go back with the committee, pull out the materials from our downtown, and actually take the survey piece of the parcel and work to develop a whole overall site development plan and cost estimate for the Central Plaza.
So maybe, Maggie, you could shed some light on, I just pulled a packet from last year when this issue was brought to us and it was tabled. So the presentation materials were given to us at that time, and there's two concepts already put together and designed, created. So those were just conceptual, of course. So are we starting brand new, or this material, this presentation and the estimates that were drawn up, were they just by the committee, or did we have a professional kind of give us some
Right,
estimates for
so,
these?
so, yes, these are both concepts, clearly, and the idea was to bring them in front of city council to get an idea of what was in mind, not necessarily at that time to make a decision. So with SEH now potentially being involved, they want to bring on Jen Crava as a paid subcontractor because she's already done all of this work. And conceptually, she is a landscape architect as well. So with an engineering firm and someone with artistic insight, working together, hoping we can come up with something, maybe a hybrid of these two concepts, or it might divert totally from these concepts
Okay.
based on
Because it's pretty
the
detailed.
ADA
I'm
and
sure
the
it's
other
got
things.
the types of trees, the types of shrubs. It's a pretty detailed
Yes.
design already.
Yes, yeah,
Oh, wow.
it is.
But I would offer up one of the challenges, as I'm trying to tell you, that the visionary concepts and the things that were coming forward were with materials. She's the landscape architect, but she hasn't been involved in dealing with Minnesota construction weather, and some of the other things that the committee had come up with were going to be a significant challenge, like I said, from an ADA standpoint, from a walkway, from all of the elements, whether it's trees or shrubs or any of those kind of things. Not all of those would likely all be able to survive on a lot like this in a commercial downtown area through a winter setting, through a hot summer.
Sure.
And that she hasn't had direct experience in putting out a project, and so that's the piece and the element that SEH can bring to the table,
Yeah.
working with the contents that came from that committee.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to circle back to March when this was presented in our packet and then it was tabled. And at that time, I was surprised that the number was that large because prior discussions before that were in numbers that were less than the 179,000. So I don't know the cost or whatever the value, but to me, I'm just circling back to make sure that we were never presented with that information formally. So before we hire an engineer, I guess I would like to have the discussion, what is the budget that we should be talking about?
Right.
Because the engineer seems to be the second step in it. We didn't have a chance to discuss the packet from last year, so the range was 116 to 179,000. And I'm not suggesting a low side, and I'm sure it's going to be much more than that now. But somehow conceptually, we should have a number. And I understand, I believe, when we talked about it earlier, this is all going under GEO, under the bond issue this year. So this is all gonna be funded.
It can, and in fact, it's really timely that we're taking a look at this because we're in the process of working with our financial advisor, Baker Tilly, to put together the city's overall bonding package. And so one of the only unknowns that we have right now is what are we wanting to do with this Central Plaza
Right.
piece of property from both an engineering and what might we include from a construction standpoint to ultimately bid it, to be able to include it in the bonding.
Right.
If for any reason, and in the discussion, and I'll give you the pros and cons on the upper limit, and then I'll also comment on the cost estimates that were contained in there.
But just to clarify, we had never talked about this in the sense of it coming from park funds or anything other than this GO bonding. That's the only place we've ever talked about it coming from.
Correct.
Yeah, so
So there,
that's
there-
what provides a lot more leeway, I guess, is.
it is that in talking with, bond counsel, that it is eligible with the discussion along the lines that we're talking about, that it is an extension.
Of the Main Street project.
It is an extension of the landscaping and streetscaping and lighting that we're doing in the downtown project, that's coming up Central Avenue a ways, and it's being done in front of the parcel on Main Street. And so its inclusion as a component to be able to be paid for under the bonding program and included in our overall project cost, it is an eligible item to do that. And so that was the first thing. Wanted to make sure that we weren't subject to any kind of reverse referendum or referendum or any park requirements, which is why I'm trying to stay away from, this is not technically a park. We'll have to figure out what or whose jurisdiction we ultimately put it under after we create it, which is obviously a concern in how it gets built, that we do what we can to try to minimize the amount of maintenance that we have to do. Obviously, we're gonna have snow removal around two sides from a sidewalk standpoint, and cleaning the parking lot that would be on the north end as part of what we already do right now. But incorporating it into the downtown project, my first question to bonding council was, can we do it? And the answer is yes, we can. But the council hasn't gone any further to allocate any additional engineering or design work to figure out what is an actual component that is on a set of plans that we can react to and bring to you that shows that layout and shows a fairly detailed cost estimate so that we know what we're doing. We're confronted with a limitation on the construction side of it. If we keep it at or below 175,000, then all we have to do is to solicit quotations. If it were to exceed 175,000, then we fundamentally have to go through the formal bidding process like we did with the highway project, where you advertise it and you bid it for 3 weeks and you go through all those hoops. So, there's just a standard, not that we wouldn't attempt to solicit, we'd put an ad in the paper and, we would send it out to all of the viable, landscaping entities that we know of in that process. But we never have gotten to the point to really have any kind of formalized discussion. And what you're seeing in those materials, Bruce, that you're pulling up is preliminary concept estimates put together by Ms. Jen Crava that we have some serious questions with, and whether they adequately identify costs, and whether some of those costs should be spent or not be spent because of the construction season and the construction situations that we have are quite different than some of the areas that she has worked in.
Well, thank you. I was wondering where some of that came from, so I appreciate that.
So my understanding then, for council and Bruce, is that by agreeing to the 15,000 for task 1 and task 2, that Jen Crava would be brought into all of those conversations, and then she would help design what the concept would look like. And what we have here is very, very ambitious, and I understand some of the engineering issues and the maintenance issues, so I think this probably is a better way of getting to where we want to go by having actually the experts meet together instead of an ad hoc group of people that, for like the aesthetic value, so.
Well, we don't want to lose all of the work that the committee did.
Yeah.
So how do we, with her assistance, working with SEH, try to blend that to come up with a final concept, while at the same time trying to go back and double see is with what we did on Main Street, is there any of that that can be brought in to maintain or develop the continuity off of Main Street right into the Central Plaza area.
Yep.
But also in answer to Bruce's question, I'm gonna have to pull a number out of the air from planning purposes to put into the budget that we're trying to finalize right now, that we're looking at probably coming to the council on July sixth to call for the sale of the bond issue downtown. And, you know, most of those major pieces have to do with the water and the sewer line replacement pieces are the largest share of what we have to finance, with the idea that we would sell bonds on or about August 2nd, and bond proceeds would be in our hands the first part of September. But in doing that, I'm gonna have to guesstimate or estimate, are you comfortable with us putting something in that overall project budget for the engineering and some dollars to develop Central Plaza, even though we don't have all of the final answers? And that in the alternative, let's just say I guess wrong or I guess too high from what you ultimately do, what happens is any of those proceeds that might be left after we complete all of the 2021 project, if there's any of those proceeds are left, then they would be left and available to be used towards paying down any of the debt service that we would have as part of this project.
Okay, that was my question.
Yep.
If you overshot it.
You can't, it's not gonna be itemized to extent where you can pay off this project. It's gonna be paid on the bonds, you mean? Is
Yeah,
that-
this would be a subcomponent within the bonds now.
Or you could pay it off sooner?
We will break down, when you get those materials that I bring you, is the three major pieces are the water fund, the wastewater fund, and the stormwater fund will be paying for those major component pieces. We've got state aid covering another piece, we've got the $1.7 million grant from the state that we get, and up until now, we really haven't had anything with any kind of, and then we have, special assessments are in that as well, in that total, and we have to pay for the costs up front, and then we would likely assess those over 15 years, and you'll be dealing with that in September and October this fall. I'm sorry I don't get to be here for that process, but Ken and the staff and whoever replaces me will guide you through that process. But so as of right now, there is no specific general obligation debt service from a tax levy standpoint.
Okay.
So it's the council's opportunity as we take a look at this right now to really improve a piece that, as you heard Mark talk about tonight, has sat there for what? The last 15 or 17 years with nothing being done. And so do you want to turn it into a showpiece in the downtown, right at the intersection of Central and Main Street?
Well, I'll make a motion to approve an agreement with SEH for the Central Plaza Design Project to encompass just task 1, the preliminary design, and task 2, the design development.
Okay, Maggie made a motion. Is there a second on it?
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Sean. There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I'd just like to understand then, is that, those items 59,970 then?
15,000,
So task 1 and task 2 are 15 apiece?
correct.
Yeah, collectively
15
together is about
collective.
$15,000 together.
Okay.
So then, I'm presuming by way of the way Maggie is structuring that, is that once that plan and those cost estimates are brought back to you, and you say, okay, we like what we see, the cost appears to be reasonable, then you would engage SEH for the balance of the engineering contract to be able to move into preparation of construction documents after you've seen what that looks like.
correct.
That would be
Is
correct.
that kind of how I'm reading
Yes, yes.
what you're doing?
Yeah, so we would come back, and then, that SEH hopefully will hold the, not to exceed cost at, 59,970.
And then
Well,
further,
part with that is gonna be that piece, Maggie, is, the plus expenses.
Right.
So it's gonna have to be, for task 1 and 2, and the expenses, because that's where Jen Crava, would likely be involved.
Okay, so task 1 and task 2, roughly $15,000, plus expenses.
You okay with that, John?
Yes, I will still maintain that's too important for downtown.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm for the,
we're,
project overall.
we're comfortable with limiting it to the 175,000 as a project as, number that they're gonna work with then?
We never had any discussion about,
No,
But that's what the contract
but
says.
that's what the understanding says, is that the cost not to exceed 175. I think by doing task 1 and task 2, we'll get a better understanding of what that cost will be.
we're gonna get that final number then. The holding the 175 would be either going out for bids or not going out for bids.
Well, my
Or
my
maybe
guess would be is if you give them a number 175, they're gonna come close to 175.
Okay.
Don't you think? I mean,
I would
that's
hope so.
fine with me, but
No, I would hope so.
No,
they're not gonna come with 116.
The simple discussion about the 175 is exactly what I just told you a few minutes ago, that it was designed to talk about how or what would we have to do to, what would be the construction limits of how would we have to formally approach the process, that it would likely invoke a little bit extra in cost if we exceeded the 175 from the preparation of bidding documents and the bidding process to comply with the state requirements, versus if we keep it at 175 or less, then we're able to handle that through a modified set of documents.
Yep,
And we could solicit quotations versus the formal bidding.
got it.
So that's where that
Coincidentally-
number,
Yeah, coincidentally, it was the high estimate from last year. So I just assumed you pulled that number there.
but just for discussion purposes, for me to put together, working with Patty and Terry Heaton of Baker Tilly, from a planning standpoint, within the overall project budget that I've gotta bring bonding back to you in July, is I'm gonna have to use likely the extent and the scope of the engineering contract, plus 175 just for planning purposes, but that you still have a lot of time to impact the decision-making regarding that. I just have to begin moving forward to plug a number in there to make sure, number one, that it was legal, and that it's eligible to be done. Ultimately, when they bring back a design and a concept and a cost estimate, we'll all have a better idea of what we're talking about needing to be done. And if I plug in 175, I could be high, and what I'm telling you, if there is excess monies left in there, anything that would needed to be bond for and paid from a tax levy, those dollars can be used to cover that.
Yeah, I guess I have a question. That's a different question. We'll go down a rabbit hole here, but just my final question then is the 59,970, is that gonna be through bond, or is it gonna be paid from that money reference, the 60,000 permanent easement fund that wasn't spent?
We originally, going back to the feasibility study, that we had 60,000 budgeted to acquire a permanent easement of that property.
Right.
That never had to materialize.
So is it gonna come out of the bonding, or is it gonna come out of that fund, that money that's left over?
Well, no, that would have been included in the overall bonding.
Well, that easement money reference was gonna be coming out of the bonding?
Yes,
Okay, so this 59,000 will come into the bonding,
correct.
so it's gonna be 100 and,
Well, it'd be
200 some
it'd be the
thousand.
construction plus the engineering is what I would have to plug into the overall bonding project.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, how does everybody vote? I vote aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and then we're gonna go to that, next agenda item that got pulled, the petition and waiver agreement on the 6-inch water line.
Excuse me, Mayor, if you
Yeah.
can,
Or do you
handle
want us to?
everything but that item on consent first,
Okay,
and then come back to that, I may have the city attorney able to connect in and be able to answer questions.
okay. So then we'll do the consent agenda minus item J.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the extraction of item J.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Okay, now we're back to item J.
If you'll give us a second, we'll try to give you a quick overview of what that was, and since Ken handled that, I'll let him do that. And then we've got Scott is connected in. Scott, you want to connect in while Ken gives an overview?
Yep, doing so.
All right.
Hi.
All right, so I'll give a quick overview here for you. So with the downtown reconstruction project, we had offered all the commercial building owners an opportunity to provide not only the 1-inch domestic water service into their building, but look at the option of a 6-inch water line. And that would provide for fire suppression into the building should they see the benefit for that. Now, bars, restaurants, and a number of other buildings can easily benefit from that from a building code standpoint to further their capacities and just make reuse of their building really much more valuable down the line. Mr. Novak did not take advantage of the offers to put in the 6-inch water line during that initial process when we were going through that. And I don't even remember, Matt, when most of that work was done earlier this spring or even into last fall. Yeah, so going back a year. So fast forward to about, I don't even know if it was 2 weeks ago, got an inquiry from a potential purchaser of Checker Sports Bar. And in my discussion with them and Chedlander, our building official, the determination was made that they were interested in the building, in adding a kitchen into the building, which there is ability to do that without having fire suppression, but it makes it a heck of a lot easier. And there's some other insurance implications for the new owner and operation to have fire suppression in the building. So we went through a really scrambled last minute process to come up with a quote from the contractor. Most of the sub-base work had already been done out in front of the building by the time we even had the inquiry. And when it finally came to the point of, hey, what would this cost to do it? And is there time to do it? I mean, we literally were like the last day, I think, in getting it done, and that had to be made by noon on Friday. So as part of that process, there was substantial additional expense from what it normally would have been if had it followed the normal process to get the 6-inch water line in. And for that reason, we enlisted Scott Riggs to help out, put together this petition and waiver agreement. And there's a couple other things that came into play that the current building owner, Mr. Novak, did not want to pay the cost directly. So they have kind of a purchase agreement, sub-agreement in place that if the deal falls through, he collects the money to pay for this full improvement at about $25,745. If the purchaser goes through with the purchase, this will be added to their normal assessment for the building, including the street and other utilities that have already been identified. So that's what Scott was tasked with. I think we gave you about 3 hours to work on that on Friday morning last week. We got it put together and the property owner signed it. Really protects city's costs in getting recouped and preserves the ability to assess with the new property owner as well. So I don't know, Scott, you probably have a better insight on kind of the legal part of the agreement, but it was really covering our costs, make sure that it was being paid for by somebody, and ultimately this agreement took care of that.
Yeah, that's correct. I can jump in just quickly. It is a very standard agreement. We've used this in the past for petition and waiver type projects where we have a 429 assessment occurring. Ken's right. We talked about this on Friday, put it together, obviously modified a few things to fit the project, and that's what we ended up with, the agreement you have before you tonight.
I think in the end, it, you know, it was a lot higher cost than it would have initially been had this been done initially, but with the property owner, current property owner, Mr. Novak, agreeing to it, the new owner, work got done today, I believe, fully. So no hitches with that. And this kind of formalizes, I know, Scott, we talked if this needed to go in front of the council and you felt it was just good to throw on a consent agenda, even though it's generally speaking part of the overall street project that we already had authorization for, but this just provides another layer of review and oversight to that.
That's correct. Typically, you would not have an agreement like this come once the authorized project was moving forward, because it really is an agreement that's authorized under the original approval of the council. But being that it was last minute, it was a little bit unique and different from some of the other properties that were doing this. That's why I said put it on and at least have a discussion if necessary.
Scott, I just had a couple of questions about the format and how it actually works then. And because you're waiving hearings and things, that I just want to make sure I understood. Are we maintaining our prior lien on the property? Does this assessment become a priority lien? So other creditors or anything are not ahead of us then?
Yeah, it'll be like any other 429 assessed lien we have. It is a tax lien. That's what it becomes. So yes, it would be there if it was to be foreclosed on or in any matter, the property owner turns hand, it still would be part of the assessment. Even if it went through a bankruptcy, we have authority under the statute to reassess for something like this.
It just occurs to me as a previous banker, banks have no idea that this is happening because there's no hearing or anything in case. So it's, but like's the case most of the time, people don't really care about bankers, but.
I always cared about you.
Or lawyers, so don't laugh.
Well, yeah, I guess it's, then the mechanism part, section 10, I was trying to understand then. Let's say the property doesn't sell for 3 years. What happens, or how does the mechanism kick into place where we can immediately demand payment in full that's described here? How do we do that? Let's say the sale doesn't happen for 2 or 3 years, or maybe it,
right.
We just in limbo land here. The document doesn't really describe, the trigger points here.
Yeah, no, I understand that, Bruce. And in all honesty, the idea of the agreement we put together was to get it before you so you understood that this was going on. It was unique. It was different. Ken and I talked about the language. I put as simplistic of language as I could put in there with the idea that we maybe even will update it if necessary, if we think there's a reason to. That's a good point. We don't have a drop dead date. The anticipated idea here was that it was tied to the existing purchase agreement. And I have no problem adding that in right now and saying it's tied to that dated purchase agreement. If that does not go, that's the intent of the immediate payment at that point in time.
I don't know if we need to change it or any of that. I just been around the block a few times to know that sometimes these deals get delayed for long periods of time or they don't happen at all then. And we're agreeing to do these improvements on the benefit of this person, this property, and we might not get payment for quite some time.
Right.
That's a possible outcome. And how do we leverage it, or how do we make it happen? And I don't know.
The only way to leverage the immediate payment, and again, keep in mind, if the transaction occurs and this does go through, this agreement is putting an assessment on there like all the other ones are going to be assessed, so it'll be paid over time. The only time that there's an immediate payment would be if the deal falls through for the transaction that was contemplated between the two parties. So we can certainly clarify that. I think that was mentioned in Ken's memo that is in the packet. The bottom line is is the city will be paid, whether it's immediate or over time. The intent was this was going to be over time unless somehow the transaction didn't occur. I don't know, Ken, we can talk further about clarifying and putting something in there that says specifically the purchase agreement, but it clearly was that basically the contemplated agreement would be the trigger point here. So I can certainly add that if that makes everybody comfortable.
Well, I'm trying to, so it's kind of, maybe not confusing, maybe there's, so it can go both ways here. The wording states that it's going to be assessed and paid over time, but then there is a provision that we can ask for it immediately as well, so we have a belt and suspenders kind of thing going on?
So the understanding was that if the deal fell through, Mr. Novak did not want that to go on his taxes. He has, I don't know if it's a deposit or an escrow of cash that he would then say, here you go, city, pay that portion of this water line off, so that that wouldn't end up on the taxes for 15 years. Because he wasn't gonna pay the whole, existing assessment in full either.
Yeah,
He
we
just
don't
wanted to-
know if there's a pot of money, or we don't know if anything's in
The
escrow.
development agreement, they were putting up some kind of a cash deposit. That was
Okay.
really, I think, Scott, we talked, that was between the buyer and the seller. But ultimately, if that didn't occur, we're gonna put it on the taxes anyway, so.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure how my feeling is on that. I just know that I've seen deals like this that don't happen. They don't work as quickly as you think they might.
Yeah.
And we're treating someone differently than all the other businesses, but.
Well, you are, but you're after the fact where all the other businesses made that trigger point before. So we're coming in after the fact and trying to make this work. The bottom line is, if the transaction occurs, or even if we never are paid, this will go through the regular assessment process like all the other properties. And we have this petition and waiver in place where they will be assessed like every other property that did this on the front end or further up in the process. So the only thing that gets us a benefit here is if the deal doesn't go through, we've been told there's an escrow available and the owner wants to pay it immediately. That's what section 10 is really saying.
Correct.
If the deal occurs as everybody anticipates and the property is sold, they'll be treated like every other business on Main Street.
Well, I think just the fact that we have documented this conversation and our intention is to assess it, even though maybe the document doesn't spell out the mechanics as detailed, that's fine. That's good enough for me. But are we gonna know before November when we have to go to the county to put this on the tax rolls that the deal sold or didn't sell?
Sure hope it would be done by that point.
So we don't have an understanding?
The closing, as I understand in talking with the purchaser today, is designed to close on or before August 15.
Okay, so then we would know
And
for the
if-
tax rolls then.
Yeah,
I think, and I'm
if
not
it's-
trying
If
to,
it has not, sorry, if it has not closed, Bruce, my advice, and Ken and I talked about this would be part of the assessment roll, and somebody would either prepay it or it becomes part of the regular assessment.
but that's great. I think I'm very comfortable. It'd be good to
Okay.
make sure we share that information with him. Our understanding is that we're gonna assess it one way or the other in November.
Yeah, and they
So we have
understand that.
open
The
communication.
provision number 10 is really for Rich's current property owner, so that if this falls through, he's got cash and he's just gonna pay that off and then it's done.
But he would, just to keep the communication, he would need to do that by November.
Yeah, I mean, he'd still have the opportunity after the assessment hearing, even if we went that far with it, we give him, what is it, 30 days or whatever?
30 days to pay,
So.
without interest.
I'm
Otherwise-
comfortable. And Scott, I'm sure you've been involved in closings where purchase agreements, people start suing each other before they close and.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand your concerns, and hopefully we've explained it enough. We were trying to do this as quickly as we could, and I do believe we're in a reasonable position with this agreement, and we will be collecting the dollars one way or the other.
Well, thank you for the information.
Thank you.
Thanks for jumping on a call so late in the evening.
No problem. I actually was at another meeting, and I thought you were gonna call me when I'm standing there, but I actually made it all the way home, so that was pretty good.
Good.
I have a question. We removed it from the consent, agenda, And it was sitting out there in a limbo, do we have to?
We just have to approve this one now.
Alright,
So, okay, I would take a motion to approve the petition and waiver agreement for the 6-inch water line at 125 East Main Street.
I would make that motion to approve the petition and waiver agreement and also authorize the mayor and city administrator to execute the document.
Okay, is there a second? There's a second. Rick made the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome.
All right, I think we've exhausted the agenda. Miscellaneous, I'll start with you, Rick.
Nothing.
Bruce?
Just to circle back on Liza's in this community meeting, if we do this community meeting or luncheon type of thing, and I think we use chamber as maybe a starting point, I think it'd be good if there are people that we might have an interest in inviting, that we think of names and try to add names. The school is an example, and make sure we have a representation from a few people from the school attend, if we decide to do that. And if there's other institutions like Chart or someone to make special invitations, it might be worthwhile. We might have talked about it last time, but I just want to make special acknowledgement to Bob Gilman, who I served in planning and zoning before, and I read the minutes that was his last meeting, so I think he done a great job for this city, and I acknowledge him. That's all I got.
Do we do something for those people?
We generally have tried to do certificates of appreciation and invite them into the
Okay.
council meeting and recognize that, but obviously we're
Don't understand.
still doing the transitioning piece and getting people onto the different boards and commissions right now. And then we would turn to try to put that together to do the thank yous and the appreciation and invite them in.
When we can, we'll do that, yeah. I saw that the meeting went a little long.
Yeah, it was a long one.
What happened to that then?
An item that didn't make it to the agenda here tonight. It took an hour and I forget how long on the public hearing.
Okay.
We'll talk about that probably at the next council meeting. It was a move-in house
Yep,
request from
yep.
South Street.
Okay, that's, I just curious. Sean,
I have nothing.
Maggie?
I don't have anything either.
Okay, Matt? Chief?
Just wanted to share the thought that we will still probably act on our emergency powers. We'll see what's gonna happen next week with the governor and whether or not they extend that, but I would anticipate in the next couple of meetings, we would do away with our emergency power.
Okay. Ken?
Nothing.
Mike?
You know, I can't get by without nothing, but
Leave the best for last.
but I will try to be quick as it relates to, I told you, the tentative schedule that we're looking on bonding.
Yep.
Calling for the sale, July 6th, having the sale on August 2nd, so that we've got bond proceeds in September. I'm working with Scott's office and the attorney on the condemnation. We're dealing with 6 parcels that, although we paid out the initial temporary easement amount, they didn't accept that in total, and so we've got 1 commercial and 5 residential that are and have been involved in the condemnation with documents that were filed by the attorney's office by the end of December of 2019. If you remember, we had to have complete ownership of all of the temporary easements to bid out the project back in the spring of 2020. So we did that, but we had the council authorized condemnation to be used. And so because with COVID last year, they really didn't hold any of the hearings, and so we're looking at trying to hold the 1 hearing for the parcels on both sides of Main Street in about July. And so I've got about 6 of those that I'm working with the attorneys on right now in that process. We're trying to see if we can get them settled before the actual condemnation hearing. And if we're unsuccessful, then the Then there are 3 commissioners that were appointed by both of the district courts. It's the same panel of 3 that'll hear that. Likely we might do it here, and they'll go out and view the properties and then come back and take testimony either from the property owner and or the city in regards to the value of what that temporary easement is worth, and then they'll render an opinion, and that's ultimately what we'll finally have to pay. All of that's to be reimbursed by MnDOT. All of our legal costs and the appraisal work and the commissioner stuff, all of that is supposed to be reimbursed under our agreement with MnDOT. And so Patty and I have been working on pulling together all those details so that we can do a billing with MnDOT and, you know, clean up that aspect of the project. And again, trying to get as much of that done again before I leave so that, you know, those things are all done and buried and aside so that nobody has to pick up new coming into this office. And so the bonding, the condemnation, and, you know, the MnDOT billing is we're trying to get all of that done and to focus on that right now.
Mike, can I just, let's throw this out there. I know when you talk about the bonding and you're discussing that in the next month or two, for people like, that are paying it in full, and we know that we've been, or at least I've been told, the church plans to pay theirs all in full. Is there a way we can keep that part out of the bond? Because
The what, Bruce?
the church plans on paying their assessment in full. So instead of bonding, when we know we're gonna get the payment in a month or two, is there a way we can just reduce the bond by that amount, or?
Well, the problem is that when you go through that entire assessment list for the different properties, no, I don't know that. And you know, I don't know what that situation, and you're telling me about one in particular. And normally we do it for the whole entire amount. If somebody then does pay up front, then that's where, in some cases, they're paying for the full 15 years of the assessment all up front within 30 days without any interest. And so in that bonding, we also have others that don't pay, even on a timely basis as you go through. And so, you know, we have to have enough monies in the account to be able to take care of those, you know, because when the debt service comes due, I don't get to say, well, so-and-so hasn't paid, or these number haven't paid, and we have to have monies to be able to pay that. So that's why we've typically just issued it for all of the assessments. And then in the end, when we take a look at it, and you've had and seen some of those, that when we close out a particular bond issue, if there's any additional interest or any monies left in there, then the council is able to selectively decide what you do with any of those proceeds. So I wouldn't routinely do that, and, you know, I can give that some thought, but I wouldn't normally and customarily do that.
Well, you mentioned earlier tonight that you thought the bonding, if you put this project, this other small park or whatever call it in there, we might be able to prepay it if we had extra money. And the bonds typically do not allow prepayment, but you mentioned we'll sub-itemize this and we might have the ability to prepay it.
But those proceeds from that is what gets used to pay the contractor for the improvements that are done that we're paying on.
Right, I understood you to say if we over bond in a sense, and we had extra left over, we could use that and pay it back early or pay it down. And maybe I misunderstood what you said then.
No, that was correct.
So we have the ability to prepay in that circumstance. So if we have a big assessment, like the church is an example, and we feel fairly confident they're gonna pay it off in November, is there a way we can set up part of it as giving us the ability to prepay it, where normally it wouldn't be? Because normally if someone prepays their assessment, we have to hold on to it because we can't prepay it.
We
So
do, it
sits
stays
in
as cash in
it sits in a cash account, which
in the
is
project fund and
Right.
set aside for the debt service
for
side
30
of.
years or 15 years.
Well,
yeah.
no, the maximum is that if we do this, as we've done with other projects, we typically would give the property owners along Main Street the same repayment terms and options that the council has historically provided to all of the other residential reconstruction projects that have been done around town. And that repayment term has been at about 15 years. And then we do an interest rate at 1.5%, whatever our cost of borrowing is.
Right. All I'm saying is if the church gives us all this money in November, it's gonna sit there for 15 years or whatever the time period. And that's just unfortunate that we have the ability to why not try to give us the ability to prepay the bond for at least something where normally it wouldn't? If you're able to do it for the park part of the project, can't we do it some other way? So I'm just asking if you can throw it into your thinking or they can.
I can look at it, but as of right now, in the bonding, is that the pieces of repayment are going to be coming out of the water utilities, the wastewater utility, the stormwater utility, the assessments, we're using state aid, we've got the federal grant that we have. Right now, I don't have anything that necessarily would be the tax levy unless and what we do with Central Plaza. So the question you're asking is difficult to break up
Because
amongst
it's in
all
so
the
many pieces, okay.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
Well, financially. because
I
my
hear your
life-
question.
It's a disappointing, missed opportunity, just the way things are. Because here we're gonna get all this money, we can't do anything.
Well, I can certainly ask and take a look at it as we're putting this together. You know, you can ask more when we get to the providing of the materials so that you can see more of the complete picture of the breakout and how this is being scheduled and what we're trying to do when we come in on
And-
July 6th.
And I don't even know if the church's assessment by itself is really a material number. I'm assuming it is, but I don't know that. So it might not be worth the effort of pushing it, but I just
Good question.
throw that out there because they made that,
Somebody
they
asked.
made that comment to me that that's what their intentions are.
Cool. Anything else?
No.
No. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? I'll make the second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye.